Chapter 155. Chapter 155 Slander. What do you girls think? Is elder brother disciple Feng Yan really Master Lian's illegitimate son? Inside the female hostel of Huyang Academy, a young girl with a freckled face asked the other three girls with her, a gossipy expression all over her face. If Ling Han was here, he would definitely recognize that one of the girls here was Shen Ziyan. I would assume so. If not, why would Master Lian be so protective over him? That would mean going against the imperial family. A young girl whose hair was tied in two braids said. Maybe, but who knows if he might be the illegitimate son of his illegitimate son? A green-clad young girl asked. Shen Ziyan did not say a word. She had been the most talented student in Grey Cloud Academy, which was something that had always given her great pride. But from the moment she entered Huyang Academy, she knew that she was only the frog at the bottom of a well. Anyone here was no weaker than her in terms of talent, and the majority was stronger than her. Moreover, she came from a lowly background, and in this academy that had gathered all the youths from noble backgrounds, she was naturally unable to raise her head. Within a short month, all her pride and arrogance had been rubbed out. What kind of enmity does elder brother disciple Feng have with that Ling Han that he would let his brother collect evidence of Ling Han's misdeeds, and would even promise a reward for information? The braided girl asked curiously. When Shen Ziyan heard this, her eyes suddenly lit up. Younger sister disciple Shen, you came from Biyuan City, and elder brother disciple Feng and that Ling Han also came from there. Do you know what kind of grievances exist between them? The freckled young girl asked Shen Ziyan, suddenly recalling that the latter was also from Biyuan City. Shen Ziyan's expression darkened, and she said, Ling Han is an ignorant, incompetent, despicable, and vulgar character. Do you all know how he managed to enroll into the academy? No. The other three girls shook their heads. He begged his father, who used his own life to trade for this opportunity to enroll in the academy. Shen Ziyan declared, smiling coldly. What? How could someone like that exist? The other three girls gasped in shock. Of course. Shen Ziyan continued to smear Ling Han's name. Have you ever heard of the Dark Demon Forest? We've heard of it before. That is a very dangerous place that not even spiritual pedestal tier elites would dare to enter. The three girls nodded. I heard that more than 100 years ago, a member of the Huyang Academy entered the Dark Demon Forest and lost an ultimate treasure inside, so Ling Han's father managed to make a deal with the academy. He would enter the Dark Demon Forest to retrieve that ultimate treasure, and Ling Han would be able to enter Huyang Academy. Shen Ziyan said. He's really too despicable. What an unfilial son! The freckled young girl and the other two girls all shook their heads at this. He was practically scum, actually asking his father to take such a great risk and endure formidable dangers just for himself to be able to enter the academy. Shen Ziyan smirked coldly. Rumor had the highest demand, and within a few days, Ling Han would become a rat that everyone would want to throttle. She despised Ling Han. This despise had begun since the betrothal contract between Ling Han and herself had been set down. However, after Ling Han's abrupt rise to power, this despise had transformed completely into hatred. She absolutely did not want others to laugh at her behind her back, mocking her for being blind and missing out on the perfect husband. Thus, she wanted to utterly discredit Ling Han, and for him to lose all standing and good reputation. Ling Han advanced very quickly, and after a mere 4 days he had broken through to the 7th layer of element gathering tier. But he was not the fastest. There was another that was even more of a monster than he was. Hunyo. The little girl's spirit base was not only very weird, it also possessed an ability to absorb spiritual chi that was no weaker than Ling Han. Moreover, after she had hatched out from the egg, she had somehow obtained a cultivation technique that was completely able to suit the rapid speed at which a heaven-grade spirit base absorbed spiritual chi. Merely from this aspect, she was definitely not any slower than Ling Han. More importantly, she could still eat. Her ability of being able to transform any food that she had consumed into her own origin power had not disappeared after she had managed to awaken her spirit base. On the other hand, this ability had become even more powerful. Thus, after a mere 5 days, the little girl had reached the 9th layer of body refining tier. However, he did not know if the barriers separating the various major tiers would be able to detain her for a while. After all, breaking through this barrier involved the comprehension and understanding of her cultivation level, and energy was not the only thing necessary to break through. And yet, this was completely no issue for her. After a day, Hunyo quietly stepped into element gathering tier, so smoothly as if it was as easy as drinking water for her. Ling Han did not know what to say anymore. Could Hunyo also be the reincarnation of a powerful, ultimate existence like him? That was not impossible. After all, the spirit base in the little girl's dantian was really too weird. It not only took the form of a magnificent beauty, it could even open its eyes and had almost obliterated Ling Han's spirit. And in the eyes of the Lu sisters, these two people, both big and small, were undoubtedly both monsters. They had watched as the cultivation levels of these two soared within a short few days' time, making them feel that this was completely unreal. Indeed, their cultivation levels were higher than Ling Han and Hunyo. However, one had to know that this was possible only because they had used up all the resources of the Falling Flower Court, which allowed them to reach a high layer in Gushing Spring tier below the age of 20. However, their future advancement could only depend on their own efforts and talent. But when they looked at the monstrous speed that these two were advancing with, it was obvious they could continue to advance in this manner even in the higher realms, and that was the really terrifying thing. Ling Han wanted to use Hunyo's cultivation technique as a reference, but the little girl could not describe it clearly no matter how hard she tried. She could only express that it was as if this cultivation technique was something she knew instinctively, and naturally knew how to circulate this cultivation technique. She did not need to understand it, nor was she able to recite it out. On the other side, because of Shen Ziyan, Ling Han's name as a despicable son had spread throughout the academy, and everyone thought that Ling Han had forced his father to sell his life to be able to enter into the academy, causing them to be disgusted by his unfilial actions. In this manner, Feng Luo became the representative of righteousness. The matter of Wei He-li's expulsion had even been brought to the surface again, as some suggested for a retrial to take place. Who knew if Wei He-li had been wrong? What do we do now? Everyone is talking bad about you. Lu Yutong came over and gritted her teeth naturally as she mentioned the rumors. Anyone who had come from Beyuan City would naturally know that Ling Han had entered the academy because he had gotten the first place in the tournament, but the mass spreading of rumors confused right from wrong, and no one would believe the truth. I know I am innocent, and if others want to wag their tongues, just let them be. But if they dare to say these things in front of me, I'll punch out their whole mouth of teeth, Ling Han said uncaringly. As someone who had once been an ultimate warrior of heaven tier, he would naturally not care about what others think of him. When he displayed invincible martial arts ability, all rumors would be naturally destroyed. Ko, ko, ko. A knock was heard from the door, and because the door was not closed, a beautiful face popped in and said, "Is Mr. Ling here?" Lu Yutong turned to look at her, and could not stop a strange expression from appearing on her. Ling Han's luck with the ladies was really a bit too strong. He had just stepped into the Imperial City for a short time, and he had already gotten to know so many different beautiful girls. Ling Han also looked at this visitor, and could not help but smile as he said, "Silly little girl, why are you looking for me?" The beautiful girl was Yun Shuang. At first, she had been in a good mood, but when she heard Ling Han's words, she immediately became furious, and said snappily, "Milady would like to invite you to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion so she can thank you personally." "Oh, when?" Ling Han asked. "If Mr. Ling does not have anything important going on, then please come over tonight." "All right." Ling Han nodded. Indeed, he did not have anything pressing to do tonight. Chapter 156. Chapter 156. Go earn money at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. "I'll go with you," Lu Yutong immediately said. She would naturally know what kind of place the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was, a money-squandering establishment for men. How could she let Ling Han go without worry? It was only now that Yun Shuang turned to look at Lu Yutong, bowed faintly, and said, "So it is the princess of the Lu clan. Shuang has been impolite." Liu Tong looked a bit awkward at being addressed so because she did not know Yun Shuang. However, in her eyes, all girls who came from the Cherishing Flower Pavilion were unbearably filthy and not characters she would deign to know anyways. Moreover, Yun Shuang was intending to drag Ling Han to play at that kind of place, which would increase her antipathy even more. Thus, she only gave a reserved nod, and did not even spare her a courteous reply. Yun Shuang could not help but show an enraged expression. She was Lady Yan's adopted daughter, and did not need to receive customers. Thus, she similarly had a high opinion of herself. However, in the eyes of a noble princess like Liu Tong, she was indeed unable to escape the reality that she came from the red light district. This was very upsetting to her. Lady Yan has made it clear. We are only inviting Mr. Ling alone. She did not clash with Liu Tong head-on, but simply used the name of Lady Yan to tactfully decline her. Nio go too! Hu Nio scrambled out and clung onto Ling Han's arm, completely looking like a spoiled child. That's right. We'll all go, Liu Tong emphasized. With Hu Nio there, even if Ling Han was driven wild by passion, he would have to behave himself. Just let them come with me. Ling Han picked Hu Nio up. The older one would still listen to me, but even I won't be able to settle the younger one. She 11. Hu Nio's eyes lit up, and said happily, Meet! 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 Yun Shuang did not mind if Hu Nio went. After all, the one who had incurred her displeasure was Liu Tong, but since Ling Han had already spoken, she could only say, Then, please come to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion tonight for a chat, all three of you. I shall take my leave for now. When she had finally left, Liu Tong looked to be in a slightly better mood. Ling Han could not help but grin, and asked, My little female attendant, are you jealous? Who's jealous? Liu Tong's beautiful face turned completely red instantly, as brightly splendid as a flower, becoming an extremely captivating picture. Ling Han laughed loudly and, changing the subject, said, How has the business of the clothing stores been? Very good. We've already managed to take over most of the business of the Qin clan. However, the Qin clan would definitely not sit by quietly and wait for their end. Either a price war would follow, or they would send someone to create a disturbance at our stores. Liu Tong frowned slightly. After all, these stores did not have the symbol of the Lu clan on them. Ling Han smiled softly and said, If they decide to stimulate a price war, it's fine. I was not planning to earn money from this business anyways. But if they dare to send someone to make a disturbance, that would give me the best excuse to pay them a visit and give them a thrashing. Liu Tong finally understood. Indeed, if the stores were smashed, then as the owner, Ling Han would of course have a legitimate excuse to make a move. But the Chen clan would most likely not make a move themselves, but rather send over members of the Earth and Water faction. Earth and Water faction! A cold light flickered in Ling Han's eyes. This faction would be willing to even do jobs like kidnapping little girls, which was evidence enough of the extent of filth in its inner workings. He had already thought of obliterating this faction. I deduced that the Qin clan would not resort to force, but would rather induce a price war to see if we would back out on our own. I'll take advantage of this period of time to first deal with the Earth and Water faction then. Liu Tong could not help but look worried at this, and said, The Earth and Water faction has relations with all 8 great clans. If you move against the Earth and Water faction, the 8 great clans may interfere. Ling Han was very displeased. In his last life, when had he ever experienced having his hands tied up like this? But who asked him to be only an element-gathering tier now? Even in a small place like Rain Country, he was not able to have a large amount of influence. Let's go to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion first. I've been spending money like water these days, so I need to earn some money first, he said after a moment of thought. Going to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion to earn money? A strange expression came over Liu Tong's face. Who would not be spending money at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion? But this guy was the exact opposite, actually thinking of earning money at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. However, when she recalled Ling Han's terrifying ability at alchemy, earning money at Heaven's Medicine Pavilion seemed a very natural thing for him to do. Let's go. Since someone is treating us tonight, let's just have lunch outside as well. Ling Han stepped out the door, Hu Niu in his arms. What about the 2 girls in the house? Lu Yutong caught up with him. She was of course referring to the Lu sisters. Oh, I was already kind enough to take the 2 of them in, and I still have to take care of their daily meals? Just let them cook for themselves, Ling Han said with a laugh. A captivating smile suddenly appeared on Lu Yutong's face. It was obvious that Ling Han had completely zero interest in the Lu sisters. Otherwise, he would not act this way. This discovery made her very happy, and even she herself felt it was very peculiar that she would be so happy. With 2 beauties as company, Ling Han arrived at the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. Young Master Han! He had just stepped onto that long and wide flight of stairs when he saw an old man in his 60s also coincidentally descending the stairs. When the old man saw Ling Han, he hurriedly approached him and greeted him very respectfully. There were 4 others behind this old man, and they were all his disciples. When they saw their master act this way, an expression of utter astonishment appeared on their faces. This was Grandmaster Yuan Chu Yuan they were talking about, a genuine black-grade middle-level alchemist, someone who was just 1 step away from being equal with the 2 biggest bosses of alchemy of Rain Country. But when they saw how Yuan Chu could not help but bow deeply, his face filled with utter respect, it was obviously not faked. That was indeed a completely sincere display of reverence. If Ling Han had been Wu Song Lin, or Fu Yuan Sheng, it would not be strange. Alchemy was the same as martial arts. The gap of different levels was like the gap between heaven and earth, but Ling Han was only a young brat. How could they not be completely dumbstruck? They've seen a ghost. They've definitely seen a ghost. They all rubbed their eyes harshly, completely unable to believe this scene was real. You are! Ling Han only recognized this person to be one of the alchemists who had observed his alchemy techniques that day, but he did not know who exactly he was. Pooh! All of them felt like they were going to pass out. Just take a look, Grandmaster Yuan Chu's face was practically about to touch your shoes, and you don't even know who Grandmaster Yuan Chu was? This really was. They didn't even know what else they could say anymore. My name is Yuan Chu, and I had the good fortune to witness young Master Han concocting alchemical pills some time ago. I have benefited greatly from observing young Master Han, but I was completely immersed in young Master Han's techniques that day and did not even know when you had left. I have committed a grave offense. Please forgive me, young Master Han, Yuan Chu Yuan said in fear and trepidation. Everyone was once again shocked. With Grandmaster Yuan Chu's status, he was actually apologizing for not personally seeing Ling Han off. Who was this brat? He was absolutely terrifying. Ling Han smiled and said, It's all right. Young Master Han, have you come to concoct alchemical pills again today? Yuan Chu asked, filled with great anticipation. He had an indescribable confidence that as long as he could watch Ling Han concoct alchemical pills a few more times, he would definitely be able to break through to become a black-grade high-level alchemist. Thus, he would of course be very proactive. Could this old man be able to tell the future? Ling Han smiled and replied, That's right. I want to concoct a type of alchemical pill. Please. Yuan Chu hurriedly said respectfully. With Yuan Chu escorting him, Ling Han quickly entered the main hall. Young Master Han. Xiaoying immediately came over to receive him, her face filled with pleasant surprise. As she had already been promoted to the position of a minor manager, she no longer needed to greet customers at the door. However, she had long wanted to see Ling Han again, and so had kept standing guard at the door recently. Finally, she had gotten her wish. Ling Han nodded at her, causing the corners of Lu Yutong's lips to rise slightly. This guy was really an expert at making women fall for him. Chapter 157. Chapter 157, Foundation Building Pill. Ling Han only nodded at Xiaoying before proceeding to the 3rd floor of the palace, escorted by Yuan Chu. This was where high-ranking alchemists would concoct alchemical pills and rest. How about this? I won't limit the number of people today. You all can observe me concoct alchemical pills, and I'll simply accept an observation fee of 1,000,000 silver coins, Ling Han said to Yuan Chu. Pooh! Once again, those 4 disciples of Yuan Chu choked. It was simply observing the pill concoction process, and you want to collect a fee of 1,000,000 silver coins. Were you trying to rob them? Even Lu Yutong's lips twitched at this. 1,000,000 silver coins for observing him concoct pills once. Even if there were only 10 people, Ling Han would be able to earn 10,000,000 coins for every time he allowed them to observe, and observing him for 10 times would allow him to earn 100,000,000. 100,000,000! The Lu clan was a large clan and had many businesses under their name, so their monthly income was definitely not just a mere 100,000,000 coins. However, if you were talking about net profit, then there was definitely not as much as 100,000,000, and it was far below such a colossal amount of money. The earnings of a single person were able to equal the earnings of an entire clan. No wonder Ling Han was so confident he would be able to utterly defeat the Qin clan in terms of finances. It was really too easy for him to earn money. But still, would Yuan Chu actually agree to such a condition? Really? Yuan Chu's eyes widened, an expression of pleasant surprise on his face. Just 1,000,000 coins? Damn! Lu Yutong and his 4 disciples suddenly felt like they were going to pass out. Yuan Chu actually thought 1,000,000 coins was a bargain. That was natural. If he could manage to observe Ling Han concoct alchemical pills for a few more times, he'd be able to advance up the ranks. How could that kind of benefit be measured in terms of money? Moreover, once he managed to advance to the next level, he'd be able to concoct even higher grade alchemical pills. Plus, when an alchemist advanced one level, the price of the pills he could concoct would also soar to a whole new level. One could definitely say that every high-level alchemist was extremely wealthy, but the majority of alchemists were not hoarders of their wealth, and would instead use their immeasurable wealth to improve their ability as an alchemist. But when an alchemist had reached black grade, which of them would not have a few dozen millions in savings? 1,000,000 was absolutely nothing to them. Ling Han was also not one who would attach a lot of importance to monetary wealth. Money was a worldly item, and when one's ability reached flower blossoming tier, mere money would not be able to buy the cultivation resources one needed. At flower blossoming tier and beyond, one would have to trade for the resources he needed with something else that his trading partner wanted. Of course, money was still quite useful to him now. Otherwise, Ling Han would not demand an observation fee. Yuan Chu immediately went off to call the other alchemists. Very quickly, the various black-grade alchemists all arrived one after another. However, there was a pitifully small number of yellow-grade alchemists. There was only Li Si-chan, Qi Tai, and a few others, and the last to arrive was Fu Yuanxing. "Old Fu, you're right on time. Help me collect money," Ling Han said, without any kind of reservations at all. At this, those 4 disciples of Yuan Chu really fainted. That was Fu Yuanxing he was addressing, one of the 2 big bosses of alchemy in Rain Country, but in Ling Han's mouth, he had become Old Fu. Meanwhile, Fu Yuanxing stepped forward, his expression all smiles. It was his honor to be able to serve a Grand Master alchemist. Moreover, whom among all these high-ranking alchemists had not begun from the position of an alchemist's apprentice? They had all started from doing odd jobs and assisting a higher-ranking alchemist, so it was nothing new to them. Thus, no one felt any disdain for Fu Yuanxing. On the other hand, they were all indescribably envious. To be able to serve a Grand Master alchemist, what an enviable task. Everyone delightedly paid the observation fee, while only Li Si-chan and Qi Tai were exempted from paying. Black-grade alchemists really did not lack monetary wealth. "Today, I'm going to concoct the foundation building pill. All of you should know that this is a black-grade high-level alchemical pill, right? I'll also get the license of a black-grade high-level alchemist while at it," Ling Han said. He would be hitting 2 birds with 1 stone in this manner. Foundation building pill. When they heard the words foundation building pill from Ling Han's mouth, all of them bore expressions of utter shock and astonishment. There were many different types of black-grade high-level alchemical pills, and of course, the level of difficulty in concocting different black-grade high-level pills varied greatly. There were 4 different levels of difficulty, and they were easy, difficult, extremely difficult, and practically impossible. Those alchemical pills that fitted into the level of practically impossible were actually close to the level of earth-grade alchemical pills. Thus, an alchemist who could successfully concoct an alchemical pill in this category was almost definitely able to advance to become an earth-grade alchemist. Foundation building pill was precisely one of those pills in the practically impossible category. This kind of alchemical pill could help a spiritual ocean tier alchemist build his foundations to prepare for the construction of his spiritual pedestal. It belonged to one of the rarest types of alchemical pills that could help a spiritual ocean tier martial artist break through to spiritual pedestal tier. The reason why foundation building pill was considered close to the level of earth grade was firstly because of the level of difficulty in concocting such a pill, and secondly because of the effects of the completed pill. For a martial artist, 3 types of alchemical pills were the most valuable for them. Firstly, the type that would help them increase their cultivation. Secondly, the type that would assist them in comprehending martial arts techniques. And thirdly, the type that could assist them in breaking through to the next level. If one would rank these 3 types of pills in order of importance and value, then it would be the exact opposite order. The most valuable, and also the rarest, was the type of pill that would help a martial artist break through to the next level. The type of pill that would extend one's lifespan was not included in this division because only natural treasures would have that kind of effect. If these natural treasures were concocted into alchemical pills, the effect would be the exact opposite. Everyone here had heard of the foundation pill before, but there was no one capable of successfully concocting it in a small place like Rain Country, and this included the 2 local big bosses of alchemy as well. If this kind of alchemical pill could be mass-produced for sale, the large number of spiritual pedestal tier elites that would appear in Rain Country could be imagined. This could very possibly overturn the balance of power in Rain Country. Even merely the thought of it caused these people to shiver. A single alchemist had the ability to completely change the power structure of a nation. It sounded like a fantasy. "I need these ingredients," Ling Han said to Fu Yuansheng. The reason why the foundation building pill was so close to the level of earth grade was because of the level of difficulty involved in concocting such a pill and its effects. However, there was not much difference between the ingredients necessary to concoct it and the ingredients necessary to concoct any other black grade high level pill, so the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion would definitely have the necessary ingredients available. And true enough, Fu Yuanxing immediately nodded, and waved his hand to command someone to retrieve the ingredients that Ling Han needed from their storage room. "How much do they cost?" Ling Han asked, smiling. "How can we accept young Master Han's money?" Fu Yuanxing hurriedly waved his hands in refusal. Yet Ling Han was adamant and said, "You must accept." Only if the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion accepted his payment would the foundation building pill belong to him entirely. How much could the ingredients for this little thing cost? 1 million? 2 million? But for the completed pill, even if it was auctioned off for 10 million, it would be considered a bargain. It was guaranteed that a large number of people would be fighting to buy it. Fu Yuanxing could only smile sheepishly. He was intending to take the completed pill to study. One had to understand that the success rate for pills close to the level of earth grade was shockingly low. If the full number of pills that could be produced in a single furnace was 10, then it would be wonderful if there was a single completed pill that was successfully concocted. 2 would be considered a logic-defying accomplishment. The ingredients for a black-grade high-level pill were still very expensive. The ingredient value for a single furnace could be as high as 3 million, and if the furnace exploded during the concoction process, that would mean the waste of a whole 3 million coins. But if the pill was successfully concocted, the alchemist would be able to earn not only his investment back, but also a colossal profit. That was what a high-grade alchemical pill was worth, especially the rarer types of high-grade alchemical pills. Ling Han was completely doing business without any kind of capital. He came empty-handed, and with his observation fee, he earned 18 million in one go. Now, he was only paying 3 million out of this 18 million he had already earned. Moreover, with his ability, what would a pill that was merely close to the level of Earth grade count as? Even if he only managed to produce 3 pills, just the thought of the value was terrifying enough. Please observe closely, everyone. I am going to begin now, Ling Han said. Because all these people had paid to observe him, it was only right for him to warn them beforehand. All of them opened their eyes as wide as possible. They would not only be able to observe a Grandmaster's techniques of alchemy, but would also be able to bear witness to the birth of a furnace of pills close to Earth grade. Merely the thought of it was enough to make them shiver in excitement. Ling Han's expression gradually became utterly serious. He was never negligent in matters related to alchemy. After taking a deep breath, he suddenly moved. His movements suddenly turned smooth and incredibly natural, filled with a unique kind of beauty that was pleasing to the eye. It was as if his movements were in line with some unknown law of nature. Chapter 158. Chapter 158, Concoction. Heavens, how could merely separating the ingredients look so beautiful? My goodness, to purify 7 different ingredients at the same time? What, I thought purifying 7 different ingredients at the same time was only meant to speed up the concoction process a bit, but smelling this herbal aroma, it seems like the ingredients are far purer than those purified in the usual manner. This is too shocking. Those who had gasped out in shock were the few black-grade low-level alchemists who had not managed to observe Ling Han's concoction process the last time. The other black-grade middle-level alchemists all bore haughty expressions, secretly calling the people who had exclaimed in shock a group of country bumpkins who had never seen the world. Yet they did not recall that when it had been their first time seeing Ling Han concoct an alchemical pill, their reactions were also the same as these people's, making a fuss about nothing, one moment erupting in clamor, and the next stunned into silence. However, as Ling Han proceeded further, all of them kept their eyes wide open, staring determinedly at Ling Han. This included Fu Yuanxing. Every move that Ling Han made seemed to guide along their focus, which would follow every move Ling Han made. In their eyes, Ling Han was no longer just a wet-behind-theirs youth, but an almighty alchemist of indomitable spirit. Every move he made was filled with an air of perfection, exuding a beautiful rhythm that only alchemists could feel. That's right. It was rhythm, or what was so-called tempo. Alchemy could be claimed as a kind of art. An art of controlling flames, an art of observing as the various ingredients transformed and merged together under high heat. It was an art filled with a very unique rhythm of its own. However, everyone here could not manage to display that feeling of rhythm. They were only following the written instructions, doing everything as what the pill formula described. They would put in specific ingredients at the time that was written on the pill formula, use flames of a certain temperature at a certain time. Everything they did was done mechanically and stiffly. Yet Ling Han had stepped beyond these limitations. Sometimes, he would obviously not be following the instructions of the pill formula strictly, but through a strange rhythm that linked all his actions together, it was a display that was too amazing for words. Grandmaster Alchemist. No, 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 Almighty Alchemist. Or even, Alchemist Emperor. They all nodded their heads. If it was not for the fact that Ling Han was too young and his cultivation level too low, perhaps he would be able to concoct Earth-grade pills now, or even the mythical Heaven-grade pills. When they thought this, they all could not help but experience shock. Theoretically, an alchemist in element-gathering tier would only be able to concoct yellow-grade high-level pills. This had nothing to do with the alchemist's ability, but was completely determined by the alchemist's cultivation level. There was nothing that could be done about it. If an alchemist's cultivation level was not high enough, he would not be able to produce a high enough temperature for higher-grade pills. Thus, the only result would be Ling Han's failure. But when they looked at the brilliant alchemic abilities that Ling Han had already displayed, he really did not seem like someone who would try out something even though he obviously knew it would fail. Unless, could it be? They all stared at Ling Han closely as a possibility rose up in their minds. Hong! A crimson flame suddenly erupted from Ling Han's palm. It was the strange fire. As expected, all the alchemists exhaled in shock as they finally understood why Ling Han would dare to concoct an alchemical pill so close to Earth grade, and where his confidence came from. Strange fire would be able to compensate for an alchemist's shortcomings in terms of cultivation level. In fact, there were some alchemists who had found an alternative by cultivating some kind of fire-aligned secret arts to increase the heat of their flames. This could be considered a dishonest way of doing things, but it allowed them to achieve a similar result. Of course, when compared with a real strange fire, all of these secret arts could only be considered inferior. Ling Han's movements became faster and faster, and more sweat beaded on his forehead. Due to the high heat rising from the furnace, signs of dehydration once again appeared on him as even his lips cracked slightly. It felt like a blur to the eyes of all the others. The rapid speed at which Ling Han was moving caused them to slightly feel as if they were unable to follow his moves. This was because they not only had to observe carefully each move that Ling Han made, but understand the rationale and logic behind each and every move. Just contemplate for a moment about one move in their heads, and they would have missed out on quite a number of consecutive movements from Ling Han. But that was all right. If they were able to learn one or two moves, it would be enough for them to study for quite a while and drastically increase their own ability as alchemists. The 1,000,000 coins that they had spent was completely worth it. Hong hong hong. Flames continuously flickered and appeared on Ling Han's hand. Sometimes the flames would be extraordinarily strong, while at other times, they would appear very weak. It was not that he had lost control over his flames. On the contrary, this was proof that the level of control he had over the temperature of the flames had reached the level of perfection. That's right. When my fusion with the strange fire has advanced to another level, guiding it would have a kind of feeling like it was done completely freely and effortlessly, Ling Han thought. He actually still had the room to think of something else. When others concocted alchemical pills, they would all be putting their whole focus on the concoction process. Being distracted for the slightest moment could mean the furnace exploding and having wasted all their previous efforts. But who asked Ling Han's alchemy standards to be too high? He could even concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills, so this was naturally a piece of cake to him. In fact, he was only thinking now. If he actually wanted to, he could completely give a lecture while he was still in the midst of the concoction process. However, if he actually did that, it was likely he would be scaring everyone here to death. Because this was a pill that was close to Earth grade. After half an hour, Ling Han's right hand suddenly trembled, and 3 different flames shot out. They were all of different colors, and it looked as if he was setting off fireworks. 3 fire guide. This was of course not as simple as it looked. The specifics of it still lay in Ling Han's personal techniques. This was of course not to be taught to outsiders. Pill completed. Ling Han did not immediately lift the lid of the furnace. The higher the grade of alchemical pills, the better their effects would be when they were allowed to stay in the still warm furnace after being completed until they had cooled naturally. Meanwhile, he began to meditate, recovering the origin power and mental energy that he had expended. How many completed pills could there be? From the look of the ingredients, there should be 8 completed pills in total. That's right. There should be 8 completed pills, but taking into account the level of difficulty for concocting a pill so close to Earth grade, managing to produce 1 completed pill would be amazing enough. 1 completed pill with quality above 5 stars could be considered successful enough. When they saw Ling Han had finally finished the concoction process, those alchemists who had withheld their words for such a long time finally began to talk. They were all discussing whether or not Ling Han had succeeded. If the furnace had exploded, that would mean that everything was wasted. But even if the furnace had not exploded, that did not automatically mean it was a success. Possibly, the completed pill may not even have the lowest quality of 1 star. However, because Ling Han was still meditating, none of them dared to rashly step forward and open up the furnace to find out. Some of the more impatient ones were already starting to fidget where they were standing. After another 10+ minutes, Ling Han finally opened his eyes. He smiled softly at them, and said, "I know that you are all very curious." All of them smiled sheepishly. but this time also involved Ling Han getting the license of a black grade high-level alchemist, so it was no wonder they were curious. "Young Master Han, don't leave us hanging anymore. I'm about to die of anxiety," Fu Yuanxing said with a laugh. This was also what everyone else was thinking to say. Ling Han pushed the alchemy furnace slightly forward, and said, "Then you may all look now." All of them hurriedly pressed forwards. However, there was really too many of them, and the furnace was really too small. Ping, pun, pun, pun. Suddenly, a lot of heads crashed into one another, causing those who had suffered from this accident to grab onto their heads and shout, "Don't cram in! One after another!" Because of his cultivation level of spiritual pedestal tier, Fu Yuanxing managed to snatch the alchemy furnace, causing the others to silently curse inwardly. However, who asked Fu Yuanxing to be a black grade high-level alchemist, a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier, and someone that had higher status and was more powerful than them? Fu Yuanxing was a bit nervous, and even the hand he stretched out was trembling slightly. All of a sudden, he lifted the lid of the furnace. "What?" he immediately gasped out in shock. His eyes were wide and perfectly round, and an expression of utter disbelief appeared on his face. "Master Fu, what is it? Could it be that there isn't even one completed pill?" all of them asked hurriedly. If it was not for the fact that they were a bit scared of Fu Yuanxing's status and power, they really wanted to snatch the furnace from him. Fu Yuanxing did not utter one word, and after a long time, he finally bore an expression of utter reverence as he said, "Young Master Han is almighty in alchemy. My admiration for you is incomparable." He lowered the furnace and showed it to the others. And inside, there shockingly lay 9 perfectly round alchemical pills. Chapter 159. Chapter 159. A terrifying pill completion rate. 9 pills! How could this be? One had to understand that even if Ling Han had reached the level of 100% pill completion rate, without wasting any ingredients at all, the amount of ingredients supplied by Fu Yuanxing was only enough to produce 8 foundation-building pills. Yet in front of their eyes, there now lay 9 pills. How was this possible? It must have failed. "Look for yourselves!" Fu Yuanxing drew out a pill and passed it to the alchemist standing closest to him. That person received it from him. He quickly examined it first, then smelt it before finally raising it high to examine it against the light. At last, a shocked expression appeared on his face as he said, "Though I am of humble talent and shallow learning, I can confirm 100% that this is definitely foundation-building pill, and what?" the others asked hurriedly. "And the quality of this pill seems to have exceeded 10 stars, the man said finally after a moment of stuttering through his words. "Pooh!" They almost passed out from shock. All of them were filled with complete, utter disbelief. In theory, when a black-grade high-level alchemist concocted a black-grade high-level pill, it was already good enough to produce a pill with quality of about 5 stars. For geniuses, they would be able to produce pills that could reach about 8 stars in quality, while incomparable extraordinary geniuses would be able to concoct pills that could occasionally reach 10 stars. But 11 stars, 12 stars, this was absolutely impossible. Only if it was a high-ranking alchemist concocting a low-grade alchemical pill would such an impossible thing happen. So did that mean that Ling Han's alchemic abilities had already reached Earth grade? Hiss! The realization caused them to inhale air sharply. "Let me see!" The others were all scrambling to take a look at the pills. Fu Yuanxing quickly called a halt to their actions. Foundation Building Pill was a pill that was unbearably close to Earth grade, so it was extremely valuable. He let the others all line up and then inspect the pills one by one. "It really is Foundation Building Pill. The color and aroma is exactly as what is described in the alchemy books. Indeed, take a look at the exquisite shine to it. Its quality should definitely have exceeded 10 stars. Heavens, I feel like I'm about to lose my mind. Something like this could actually be real." All of them were exclaiming in shock. A young man of merely 17 years old actually managed to successfully concoct an alchemical pill close to the level of Earth grade, and the quality of this pill has even exceeded 10 stars. No, they still had to take into account Ling Han's terrifying pill completion rate. 100%. It's not 100%. The ingredients should have only sufficed to produce 8 pills, but why are there 9? One of them recalled this puzzling point. Fu Yuanxing inspected the remaining 8 pills, and said decisively, I can guarantee with my reputation that these foundation-building pills are not only successful, but their quality is not the slightest bit beneath that one. Using his reputation and honor as a black-grade high-level alchemist to guarantee, then, that meant that there was definitely no problem with the other 8 pills. Genius! Young Master Han is definitely a genius of alchemy. I get it. Young Master Han managed to obtain purer essences of the ingredients with better effects from the purification process earlier on. That's why he could produce 9 foundation-building pills. That's right. The so-called limitation of 8 pills is based on the fact that normal methods of purification are used, but with young Master Han's unique purification technique, it is indeed possible to produce an additional pill. Heavens! They all grabbed onto their heads and exclaimed in shock. They all looked at Ling Han with heated gazes, as if they were looking at a god of alchemy. In fact, although their guess was not accurate, it was not far from the truth. Ling Han stood up and said, All right. I've collected the money and you've watched my performance, so I should take my leave now. He walked over and retrieved the pills, placing them in a jade bottle. Then he turned and said to Fu Yuanxing, When the license approval is done, send me the badge. Fu Yuanxing quickly agreed very respectfully, as if he was an alchemist's apprentice who had just started learning from his master. Ling Han left with Hu Niu in his arms. The little girl had already fallen asleep in Lu Yutong's arms after getting bored. However, when they arrived at the restaurant, and she smelt the enticing aroma of food, the little girl's nose twitched, and she immediately awoke. Meat! Meat! She called out in delight. After satisfying Hu Niu's gluttonous appetite, the 3 of them went to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Ling Han was not planning to keep these 9 foundation-building pills for himself, and so was naturally going to sell them off. And for this kind of rare alchemical pill, they belonged to the category of having no lack of buyers with no one willing to sell, so how could he be selling it cheaply for a named price? He was of course going to auction them off to the highest bidder. In the Imperial City, there was no auction house better than the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. However, if he decided to auction them off, there would need to be a period of advertising and publicity, so he would not be able to immediately earn back what he had spent. But it was all right. Ling Han had just earned over 10 million moments ago, and this was more than enough to support those clothing stores of his that were making losses for quite some time. What do the 2 honorable customers wanted to buy? A worker immediately stepped forward to greet them. Hu Niu was naturally overlooked by him. Ling Han smiled and said, I have some alchemical pills to auction off, so please let your appraiser come to assess my alchemical pills. Alchemical pills? Hee. There incidentally stood a couple beside them. The man looked to be in his 40s and with a disdainful expression he said, What kind of alchemical pills could a young man bring? Don't shame yourself in this kind of place. He swept an eye over Lu Yutong, and a stunned expression appeared on his features. This is Fan Dongping, Grand Master Fan, a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist. The woman beside him immediately introduced. She was quite good-looking, but her makeup was a bit overdone. The worker was a bit embarrassed. It was the freedom of the customers to decide what they wanted to auction, as long as the item they wanted to auction was found to be up to the standard of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion after appraisal. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion had a fixed commission rate anyways. However, a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist was not someone he could offend either. Thus, he first raised his clasped hands in Fan Dongping's direction, and said, I shall go and ask the appraiser Ma to come over. Then he quickly escaped. Fan Dongping looked very arrogant, and from the corner of his eye, he glanced at Lu Yutong, hoping to see an expression of astonishment appear on her face. However, he was disappointed. This beauty that seemed as cold as ice did not have any change in her expression. The gaudy woman stared at Lu Yutong in jealousy. This woman was more beautiful than her, more graceful, and most importantly, was younger than her. After a while, the worker led a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s over. This man was only in the 7th layer of element gathering tier, but a faint air of scrolls and books exuded from him, giving a comfortable feeling to others. This is Ma Tianxing, appraiser Ma, the worker introduced. Ling Han did not mind either way, handed the pill bottle to Ma Tianxing, and said, "Then I'll have to trouble appraiser Ma to take a look for me." "I'll do it." Fan Dongping suddenly stretched out a hand and snatched the pill bottle away. Then, he turned and said to Ma Tianxing with a laugh, "I am a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, and if we're talking about appraisal of alchemical pill, I should not be beneath Brother Ma, right?" A flicker of displeasure flashed over Ma Tianxing's face, but he did not express this displeasure in view of Fan Dongping's status as an alchemist. Instead, he nodded with a darkened expression and said, "Please." Fan Dongping looked immensely pleased with himself. He naturally was trying to deliberately show off and attract Lu Yutong's attention. Yet he did not consider the fact that he had reached middle age, and was still trying to attract a girl so much younger than himself. He removed the cork of the pill bottle. With a single sniff, his expression changed greatly. He took a look inside, then quickly recorked the bottle and stuffed it inside his pocket directly. He then turned to Ling Han and said, "Brat, this bottle of spirit-gathering pills is not worth much. Here, this is a monetary note worth 10,000 silver coins, and I'll buy it from you out of the kindness of my heart." Ling Han was shocked. He knew that Fan Dongping was shameless, but the extent of his shamelessness was something he had never imagined. What was the difference between what he was doing and robbing? Ma Tianxing did not know what alchemical pills were contained inside the pill bottle, but looking at the anxious actions of Fan Dongping, he could guess that they were not ordinary pills. Instantly, an angered expression appeared on his face, and he said, "This is something that the customer has passed to our Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction, so I should be the one doing the appraisal. AI, it's difficult to be kind. Take it then." Fan Dongping drew out a pill bottle from his pocket and tossed it over to Ma Tianxing. Ling Han swept an eye over it, and a cold smile appeared on his face, because the pill bottle had been swapped. How outrageously bold! Chapter 160. Chapter 160, Swapped. Ma Tianxing took the pill bottle from Fan Dongping. He had not observed closely the original pill bottle that Ling Han had brought, so he naturally had no idea that Fan Dongping had done a swap. He uncorked the bottle, took a look inside and could not hold back on expressing his displeasure. These were indeed spirit-gathering pills, and the quality was nothing too impressive either. They looked to be only about 5 to 6 stars and completely not valuable enough to be auctioned by the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. "Young man, these are just ordinary spirit-gathering pills, and they are not valuable enough to be auctioned." Ma Tianxing threw the pill bottle back to Fan Dongping, anger flickering across his face. He actually lost his composure because of a bottle of spirit-gathering pills. This was extremely displeasing to him. Lu Yutong already understood what was going on, and the gaze she directed at Fan Dongping had a sliver of killing intent. Meanwhile, Fan Dongping was extremely pleased with himself. He did not know that the pill bottle he had swapped contained foundation-building pills, but was able to ascertain that they were at least black-grade alchemical pills. To be able to obtain such a valuable item for merely 10,000 silver coins was indeed an extremely, overwhelmingly profitable business venture. If he had known that they were foundation-building pills, he most likely would not have dared to try such a scheme, because it would involve a lot of trouble that he would not be able to cope with. Moreover, the person he had cheated was just a young man that was about 16 to 17 years old. So what if he found out that the pill bottle was swapped? What could he do against a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist like him? "Let's go," he said to the gaudy woman next to him. After all, he had something on his conscience, so the best option for him now was naturally to leave this place as soon as possible. Ling Han could not help but smile, and said, "You are indeed quite bold to actually dare to scam me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm leaving." Fan Dongping's heart beat wildly in his chest. It was an absolute windfall for him to have managed to get a bottle of black-grade alchemical pills out of a scam. You can't leave anymore, Ling Han said calmly. I am a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist. Do you intend to stop me from leaving? Fan Dongping asked coldly, preparing to walk forwards. Pa! Ling Han stretched out a hand and grabbed onto Fan Dongping's wrist. He said with a smile, I'm not just going to stop you from leaving, I'm also going to thrash you. You dare! Fan Dongping shouted loudly. Let go! Let go your sister! Ling Han's fist flashed out and with a paw, hit Fan Dongping's left eye, instantly causing the guy to cry out in pain and use a hand to cover his eye. When he lowered his hand, his eye had become black and blue. Bah bastard! Fan Dongping roared fiercely. The people of Spirit Treasure's Pavilion, are you not going to interfere and allow someone to commit crime in your territory? Are you still planning to continue your business? A troubled expression appeared on Ma Tianxing's face at his words. Indeed, it was forbidden to make trouble at Spirit Treasure's Pavilion, but he was not happy with Fan Dongping's character. That was why he had not stepped out to stop Ling Han at the first moment. But as Fan Dongping had pointed out the inaction of the Spirit Treasure's Pavilion so directly, it was not proper for him to pretend that he had not heard Fan Dongping either. Young man, stop immediately! He shouted at Ling Han. Ping pun pun pun. Ling Han looked like he had not heard anything at all. He simply concentrated on giving Fan Dongping a harsh beating. Actually daring to try to cheat him. How outrageously brave of him. Fury appeared on Ma Tianxing's face. This young man actually ignored his words, and even dared to use violence in Spirit Treasure's Pavilion. He was really too brave. He snorted and called out, Guards, apprehend this brat! Lu Yutong immediately took a step forward. Hunyou's ferocious nature also surfaced as she bared her teeth at Ma Tianxing. Ling Han retrieved a jade bottle from Fan Dongping's clothes. He was of course very familiar with his own possession. He did not even take another look, and simply threw it over to Ma Tianxing as he said, This is what I wanted to auction. Ma Tianxing smiled coldly and said, You actually dared to make a move at Spirit Treasure's Pavilion, and still want to pretend nothing had happened? You're wrong. I only caught a thief myself, retrieved my stolen possession, and gave the thief a well-deserved thrashing. Ling Han said calmly and directed a dignified stare at Ma Tianxing. Ma Tianxing's heart trembled. The eyes of this young man seemed to be able to see into the inner depths of his soul, causing his whole body to tremble. Involuntarily, he uncorked the jade bottle. It was only a single instant, and an expression of utter shock appeared on his face. As an appraiser, he was naturally not familiar with the ways of alchemy. However, he was very familiar with the various types of alchemical pills, because this was part of his job. Foundation building pill! Ma Tianxing immediately gasped out in shock, indescribable astonishment on his face. In that one moment, he had already believed that Ling Han was telling the truth and that Fan Dongping had definitely played a trick on them both and swapped the pill bottles. Otherwise, how could a mere yellow-grade middle-level alchemist like Fan Dongping be able to possess foundation-building pills? So you do have good judgment. Ling Han nodded. Foundation-building pills definitely had never appeared in Rain Country, but this man could recognize that they were foundation-building pills with a single look, so it seemed like he did have some knowledge and experience. Ma Tianxing could not bother with Ling Han at that moment. He drew out a foundation-building pill and scrutinized it to ascertain the quality of it. Ling Han smiled calmly. Since that was the case, then he'd deal with his own issue as well. His foot pressed down on Fan Dongping's face and he smiled as he said, You are very brave to actually dare to scam even my things. Brat, you're dead. Fan Dongping said grimly. I am an alchemist, and you actually dare to injure me. That is a crime punished by death. Moreover, you even stole my alchemical pills. This will only make your crime worse. You still dare not to repent for your crimes. Ling Han shook his head and asked Liu Tong, According to the laws of Rain Country, How much money should a person like him steal to be able to be sentenced to death? A crime of theft could either be heavy or light. It depended on the amount stolen, as well as the identity of the victim. If 10 silver coins was stolen from a poor commoner, that would be considered a heavy crime. But for a rich man, a theft of 10 silver coins would only cause him to be looked down by others for a while. If a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist like Fan Dongping were to be sentenced to death for theft, the amount stolen would have to be exorbitantly colossal. Liu Yutong thought for a moment, then said, "At least 10 million. Ling Han turned and asked Ma Tianxing, "Are these foundation-building pills worth 10 million? Ma Tianxing immediately glared at Ling Han furiously. What kind of joke was he talking about? These were foundation-building pills they were talking about, and the lowest price for one was 10 million and above. Do you have any common sense at all? But when he recalled that these foundation-building pills were Ling Han's own, he instantly softened, and said, "There are in total 9 foundation-building pills here, and if they were to be auctioned off, the lowest price they could be sold at would be 100 million silver coins." 100 million! Fan Dongping instantly felt like he was going to pass out as an incomparably cold shiver traveled all over his body. How could Ling Han be any ordinary person if he were able to take out an auction item that was worth 100 million? But when he thought about the reality that he would really be arrested for theft, it was not only something shameful for him, the colossal amount of 100 million was more than enough to sentence him to death. Beside him, the gaudily dressed woman had already begun to shiver and silently moved away from him, obviously trying to draw a clear dividing line between herself and Fan Dongping. "No, these alchemical pills are mine. Mine." The only thing Fan Dongping could do now was to insist stubbornly that he was telling the truth. If not, he would really be finished. "Are you an idiot?" Ling Han gave him a kick. "How could a stupid pig like you be able to concoct alchemical pills that are close to Earth grade? You yourself are an idiot, so you think others are idiots too?" Fan Dongping's face became ashen. He knew that he had poked a hornet's nest now. Alchemical pills close to Earth grade. Perhaps not even the 2 big bosses of alchemy of Rain Country would be able to concoct such high-grade pills. This young man must definitely have a terrifying background. "Master Ma!" 3 guards approached quickly and looked at Ma Tianxing in question. They had come because they saw that there was a big commotion going on here. "Apprehend this man!" Ma Tianxing commanded coldly. "Then make a report to the Imperial Guards. Tell them we have encountered a crime of theft here." "Yes, Master Ma." Fan Dongping, who was currently looking like a dead dog, was immediately dragged out by the 3 guards. Chapter 161. Chapter 161, An Evil Soul. "How may I address you, mister?" Ma Tianxing was currently all smiles. The previous horrible impression that Ling Han had given him was completely swept aside, of course. This was a grand customer that was able to produce alchemical pills close to Earth grade. What other person could do such a thing in the whole of Rain Country? Absolutely none. "Ling Han. You may address me as young Master Han," Ling Han replied. Ma Tianxing involuntarily wiped off sweat from his forehead. He did not want to address a young man as young master, even one bit, but Ling Han was indeed a very important customer. If he offended Ling Han and Ling Han decided not to commission the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction off the alchemical pills on his behalf, then he'd really be in deep, deep trouble. "Young Master Han!" He could only do as Ling Han had said and address him as young master. Then he said, "Please follow me. I shall help young Master Han take care of the procedures for registration." "All right," Ling Han agreed with a nod. The news that 9 alchemical pills close to Earth grade had appeared at Spirit Treasures Pavilion very quickly reached the ears of the higher-ups. Very soon, an old man dressed in embroidered robes appeared and received Ling Han respectfully. Then, he introduced himself. "I am the 3rd elder of this pavilion. My surname is Jia, and my name is Jia Baiyun." "Senior Jia," Ling Han greeted him, raising his clasped hands in respect. This old man was a spiritual pedestal to elite, and more than deserved his respectful greeting. "Young friend, are you intending to auction these foundation-building pills here, or directly sell them off to our pavilion? Jia Baiyun asked. Ling Han smiled faintly and answered, auction. Such alchemical pills were used to assist one to break through to the next level, so it was of course best to auction them off in order to maximize their price. Jia Baiyun looked a little disappointed at this. If the foundation building pills were directly sold to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, they'd be able to auction a single pill every few years. Firstly, this would help to increase the reputation of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion, and secondly, rare items were always the most expensive. This would allow the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to obtain the highest amount of profit from these foundation building pill. Unfortunately, this brat was not that foolish. However, 9 foundation pills would definitely be auctioned off for an astronomical figure. The Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be earning more than enough from the commission alone. Young friend, if a customer commissions the Spirit Treasures Pavilion to auction items, we usually charge a commission fee of 15%. However, because the foundation building pills are much too valuable, I can make the decision to lower the commission fee to 14%. How does that sound? Jia Baiyun asked, smiling. How ruthless, they actually had such a high commission rate. Lu Yutong was pouting at one side. The value of 9 foundation building pills was definitely above 100 million, and this commission fee of 14% would be over 1 million silver coins, far above the monthly net profit of the Lu clan. However, Jia Baiyun was already generous enough to actually cut 100,000 out of the commission of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Of course, this was also because the value of the foundation building pill was really too high. All right. Ling Han nodded. Money was not something that he attached a lot of importance to, anyways. Jia Baiyun smiled and continued. If you want these foundation building pills to be sold for a good price, the best option would be to auction them over a few auctions. If young friend is not in a hurry to use money, why not use this small scheme? The more the foundation building pills could be sold for, the higher the earnings of the Spirit Treasures Pavilion would be. Thus, Jia Baiyun would naturally want to use a scheme that could earn the most profit for the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Ling Han shook his head and replied, I want them all to be auctioned off in a single auction. Jia Baiyun was stunned for a moment, then sighed. The pills belonged to Ling Han after all, so even if he was a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier, he could only make suggestions and offer advice. To Ling Han, the foundation building pill was something that he could easily concoct, so he would naturally not care if it would be auctioned off for a good price or a better price. In the end, it would definitely be an astronomical price anyways. Worst case scenario, he'd concoct a few other alchemical pills close to Earth grade a few days later, and would still be able to earn a lot of money anyways. All right. This is your letter of proof. When the pills are sold, young friend can bring this along with you to withdraw your funds. You may also endorse someone else to do it for you. However, please take note if the letter of proof is lost, please make sure to immediately report the loss here. Otherwise, if someone else withdrew the money earned without your approval, there is nothing even I can do. Jia Baiyun warned. This token was split into half, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion and Ling Han each held one half. The two halves could be joined together seamlessly. Both Jia Baiyun and Ling Han left a handprint on their own half. This would help prevent any possibility of anyone using false identities. Young friend, if you have other such pills in the future, why not come auction them off at our Spirit Treasures Pavilion again? As for the commission fee, it can still be discussed further, Jia Baiyun said. All right. Ling Han agreed decisively. Ling Han and his companions left the Spirit Treasures Pavilion right after. As for Fan Dongping, he naturally would not get a good end. Ling Han did not need to worry himself over it. Even if Fan Dongping was a yellow-grade middle-level alchemist, his crime involved an exorbitantly high sum of over 100 million. It would be very difficult for him to escape the death sentence. Who asked him to be so greedy? It was already quite late, so Ling Han headed to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, bringing Lu Yutong and Hu Niu with him. The three of them slowly strolled through the streets. Hu Niu ran all over the place. Whether it was lollipops or cotton candy or anything else, as long as it was something new, she wanted to give it a try. Thus, by the time they arrived at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, the sky was already completely dark. "Mr. Ling, this way please." Yun Shuang had already been waiting inside, and when she saw Ling Han's figure, she immediately stepped out to receive him. They arrived at a side courtyard. When Yun Shuang pushed open the door and entered, they saw Lady Yan helping out a youth and coming out to receive them. Lady Yan said, "We are honored by your presence, Mr. Ling. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Ling Han looked at the two and said, "That's all right. It is not convenient for Lady Yan as well, so I understand your difficulty. This should be your son, am I right? He has been sleeping for quite a number of years, so his body should still be very weak. Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Ling," Lady Yan said with a smile. She turned and said to the youth by her side, "Tian'er, this is your life-saving benefactor. Aren't you going to greet your big brother Ling?" "Big brother Ling," the youth immediately called. His face was extremely pale, and he spoke in a weak voice. "Mr. Ling, this is my son. His name is Yan Tianzhao," Lady Yan introduced to Ling Han. Then she took a look at Lu Yutong, and could not help but smile. "Mr. Ling is indeed very fortunate to actually be able to obtain the favor of the princess of the Lu clan." Instantly, Lu Yutong's face reddened, yet her positive impression of Lady Yan improved even further. She liked listening to such words. Come and sit down first." Lady Yan guided the others into the side courtyard. There was already a delicious feast laid out, and around them, there were 8 very beautiful female attendants holding on to lanterns. As the light from these lanterns flickered gently, it was a very uniquely enchanting scene. They all sat down in their respective seats, according to their status as host and guests. Lady Yan naturally took the main seat, and on her left sat her son. Yun Shuang was seated next to him. Meanwhile, Ling Han was seated on Lady Yan's right, with Hu Niu beside him, and lastly, Lu Yutong. "Big sister Lu, you are really pretty," Yan Tianzhao praised. A faint blush rose up on his pale face, as if he was being shy. If it had been a young man saying such words, Lu Yutong would not be very happy. However, firstly, Yan Tianzhao was only a teen around 15 to 16 years old, and secondly, she was elated to be praised like this in front of Ling Han. Thus, her good impression of this youth also improved greatly. Of course, that was the affection that an elder sister had for a younger brother. Ling Han only smiled at this. His eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, and a cold feeling rose up in his heart. This was not fear, but loathing, an extreme kind of loathing. It was as if there was an incomparably evil soul hiding within the body of this youth, causing a deep loathing to inexplicably rise up in his heart. He turned to look at Hu Niu and saw that when the little girl's eyes swept over Yan Tianzhao, her little face involuntarily stiffened, and she bared her teeth. Obviously, Hu Niu had also sensed the evil nature in him. Ling Han could not help but be immersed in deep thought. The permanent pill would be able to awaken a person who had been trapped in deep slumber. The important thing now was, why had Yan Tianzhao fallen asleep in the first place? From the clues that Lady Yan and Yun Shuang had revealed, Yan Tianzhao should have been sleeping for about 10 years. At that time, had he started sleeping because of some kind of illness? Or had he committed some great crime, which caused an unknown elite martial artist to entrap his spirit and force him to sleep for such a very long time? That was the question. Chapter 162. Chapter 162, Yan Tianzhao. Yan Tianzhao kept up a display of bashfulness, and would frequently blush throughout their meal. When Lady Yan saw this, she felt both heartache and fondness. This also increased the positive feelings that Lu Yutong and Yun Shuang felt for him, who both doted on him like he was their little brother. But precisely because of his display, the coldness in Ling Han's heart grew even further. But with the indulgent love that Lady Yan was showing for him, if Ling Han actually declared something like eliminating him at this moment, then she would definitely become hostile on the spot and suppress him like some kind of terrible monster. Ling Han would never underestimate the insane and extreme lengths that a mother would go to for her child. Moreover, this was only an intuitive feeling of his. Unless he had reached a point where he was invincible. Then, as long as he thought so, he would be able to do as he wished, with no need to care for what others would think of his actions. The unfortunate thing was, he was only in the 7th layer of element gathering tier now. Big Brother Ling, why do you look a bit moody? Yan Tianzhao suddenly asked Ling Han, a hint of a smile flickering at the corners of his lips, his gaze deep. A smile appeared on Ling Han's face as he asked, "What do I have to be moody about? Mr. Ling has Miss Lu to accompany him by his side. How could he possibly be unhappy?" Lady Yan pursed her lips in a tender laugh. She was the lady boss of an entertainment business, so she was naturally rather outspoken in her speech. Lu Yutong immediately reddened at her words, but a hint of delight flickered in her eyes. She turned to glance at Ling Han, but when she saw that he looked extremely composed, she could not help but feel a little disappointed. "I have not yet congratulated Big Brother Ling. When will you be getting married with Big Sister Yutong?" Yan Tianzhao asked in a very innocent-looking manner. This brat was indeed strange. Or so Ling Han thought secretly. When Yan Tianzhao fell asleep, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. Then, now that he was awake, he should only have the limited intelligence of a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and would need to recover for some time before his intelligence would catch up with others within the same age range as he. But just looking at the way he was speaking now, who would believe that this youth had been asleep for over 10 years? However, Lady Yan, Lu Yutong, and Yun Shuang all did not notice this discrepancy. Even if they had noticed, they'd most likely think that this brat was a genius who could immediately adapt and get used to having a normal life. Then he'd just have to see exactly how strange this brat was. Ling Han smiled. This youth did not even have a sliver of cultivation on him, so why was there need for him to be afraid? He had already mentioned it before. He only sensed a very discomforting feeling from this Yan Tianzhao, as if there was an incomparably evil soul hidden within the youth's body that incited disgust from him. "Lady Yan, it's best to serve more food. This little girl is a true glutton," Ling Han said with a laugh, pointing at Hunyeo, who had already begun scarfing down the food. Lady Yan and Yun Shuang were both astonished. How could such a tiny little child have such a terrifyingly huge appetite? "It's a good thing to be able to eat," Lady Yan said with a smile. "But she can eat too well. I'm about to be driven into poverty by her humongous appetite," Ling Han sighed. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong rolled her eyes at his words. This guy earned over 100 million in a few moments. No matter how big a glutton Hunyeo was, she would not be able to catch up to the rate he was earning money at. And he still dared to moan about being poor. What an actor! With Lady Yan's command, a large amount of food was served one after another. Hunyeo did not refuse any dish, and eventually decided not to use chopsticks anymore but rather her bare hands to grab the food. She moved at such a quick speed that Lady Yan and the others all looked shocked at the speed at which she could eat. They had seen people who could eat a lot, but those who could eat so much, they had definitely never seen before. Yan Tianzhao stared at Hunyeo for a moment longer, and a smile involuntarily appeared on his lips. She was obviously very intrigued by her. However, Hunyeo was a very sensitive little girl, and she immediately raised her head to glare at him. Her gaze was filled with ferocity and killing intent, causing his already pale face to pale a few shades further. Aside from Ling Han, no one else noticed this little episode. Because, just like no one would think that Yan Tianzhao possessed an evil soul, naturally no one would think that such a tiny, little girl like Hunyeo would have any ability to harm others. They would only think that she was a big eater. Yan Tianzhao very quickly discovered Ling Han's gaze on him, and offered up a friendly smile. Meanwhile, Ling Han gave him a very meaningful look, causing the smile on Yan Tianzhao's face to slowly fade and hidden depths to appear in his eyes. This did not look anything like a youth of merely 15 to 16 years old, what more one that had been in a coma for over 10 years and had just been awake for a few days. "Please accept this cherishing flower command, Mr. Ling." Lady Yan gifted him with an intricately carved jade plaque that was carved into the shape of a flower. The holder of this plaque would not only be able to enjoy a 20% discount in Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but can also come without any kind of reservations. There are a few side courtyards that have been set aside specifically for extremely honored customers like Mr. Ling. Ling Han received the plaque, smiled and said, "Thank you, Lady Yan." Overall, both hosts and guests quite enjoyed this feast. Of course, the happiest person was definitely Hunyeo. She had eaten so much that her little tummy was slightly rounded. But when one considered the fact that she had eaten so much food, and yet her tummy was only slightly rounded from the colossal amount she had consumed, it was a practically inconceivable concept. Ling Han now was not so curious about where the food she had consumed had gone. In comparison, the spirit base in the little girl's body was something even more shocking. Lady Yan sent out a carriage to deliver the three of them back to the academy. Yun Shuang did not accompany them this time. Only Lady Yan and Yan Tianzhao escorted them to the door and saw them off. On the carriage, Hunyeo, being a very good eater and a very good sleeper, had already found a comfortable spot in Ling Han's arms and gone to sleep peacefully. In a few moments, a long snoring sound could be heard from her. Lady Yan is really too pitiful. She had to support the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion all by herself and still take care of her comatose child. If I were her, I would most probably have broken down long ago, Lu Yutong said ruefully. Ling Han thought for a moment, then asked, "Have you ever thought about why Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma in the first place? It should have been some kind of inborn illness, right? Something like my 3 vanishing veins," Lu Yutong said. And it was exactly this fact that caused her to empathize with Yan Tianzhao and dote on him like a little brother. Then, when he fell into a coma, he should have only been about 5 to 6 years old. He has just barely woken up and yet can completely behave like a normal person. Isn't that strange? Ling Han asked. Maybe he's a natural-born genius? Lu Yutong paused, then said, You seem to be a bit unfond of Tianzhao? I don't like this person." Ling Han did not hide anything. "Niu doesn't like too." Hunyeo suddenly awoke and sat upright on Ling Han's lap, looking extremely serious. "Why?" Lu Yutong felt a bit curious. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I can't describe why. I keep feeling that this brat is extremely evil, making me have the urge to thrash him. Therefore, it's best if this brat does not appear before me again, or I will definitely have fun thrashing him." "How willful." "Thrash him. Hit him." Hunyeo waved her little hands too. "You guys!" Lu Yutong was completely speechless. Why would Ling Han dislike Yan Tianzhao? Could it be because I doted on him too much, so this guy is jealous? When she thought of this, Lu Yutong's heart could not help beating wildly. "Since you don't like it, then I won't see him again," she said, tugging at her sleeve. A beautiful blush rose up on her face, giving her a very tempting look. Was this girl misunderstanding something? But never mind, as long as she did not come into contact with Yan Tianzhao again, that would be fine. Though this brat did not have a single bit of power in him, Ling Han still felt he was really too strange. And if his deductions were not wrong and Yan Tianzhao had fallen into a coma because of something someone else did, then perhaps it was because someone had discovered his evil nature, yet could not bear to kill a young child of 5 to 6 years old, and so merely caused him to fall into a coma. Chapter 163. Chapter 163, Jin Wuji's Request. After returning to the Huyang Academy, Ling Han and Lu Yutong both went their own way. He had just stepped into his own courtyard when he immediately heard Lu Ru'er's nagging voice. "As a landlord, you are really a failure. You did not even prepare food for us," she seethed. Ling Han could not help a strange expression appearing on his face as he asked, "Don't tell me you two don't know how to cook?" Instantly, Lu Ru'er's almond-shaped eyes widened, and she blurted out, "How did you know?" "I can easily tell from looks of your incompetence." Ling Han sighed. This pair of assassin sisters were really failures. They failed at assassination and did not even know how to cook. They really were the rookies of all rookies. "Who are you calling incompetent?" Lu Ru'er asked with a defiant expression. When I have recovered all my abilities, I will definitely give you a good thrashing. Ling Han could not help but laugh, and said, Then why should I still continue to care for two enemies like you two? I've been short of money recently, and if I take advantage of the chance to provide information on two criminals, I should be able to get quite a considerable sum of money. Lu Ru'er instantly paled and gasped in fear. You're just scaring me. Am I? Ling Han crossed one leg over the other, an unfathomable expression on his face. Lu Ru'er wavered. She had always been living under the protection of her elder sister, and never needed to worry about the bad intentions of others. Now that she was facing Ling Han, who was in his second lifetime on her own, she was naturally easily played by him. Come, sing a little song for me. If you sing well enough, then I'll let you off, Ling Han said, smiling. Lu Ru'er finally understood that Ling Han was just trying to scare her, and could not help patting her breasts as she said, You're so mean! But she immediately raised her head and added, All right, then I'll sing a song. But don't think that I'm afraid of you. It's just been too long since I last sang, and I feel an itch in my throat. She opened her mouth and began singing. The song she sang was mellow, and would easily touch the hearts of listeners. Ling Han nodded internally. This little girl was a bit of a ditz, but she was indeed quite a talented singer. Looks like she went into the wrong business. Noisy! Noisy! Hunyo was awakened by the song and glared in displeasure at Lu Ru'er, her ferocious nature fully out in the open. Lu Ru'er was not very happy with her critique and said, I have such a beautiful voice, and you actually say it's noisy. There is indeed no hint of elegance in you. Han! Hunyo glared at her in defiance. The two girls glared furiously at one another, either willing to back down. From the looks of it, they were prepared to glare at each other until the end of time. Ling Han yawned, stood up and walked to his bedroom, intending to go to bed. Shio, Hunyo immediately took a great leap and clung onto Ling Han. Then, she turned and made a silly face at Lu Ru'er. Such a failure. She couldn't even handle a little kid. Lu Ru'er clutched her hair in frustration. As an assassin, she couldn't even win in a staring competition with a little girl. Was she really suited to become an assassin? When he awoke, there was a shade of pale white in the eastern sky. Ling Han sat up in a cross-legged position and began to cultivate. He was deliberately waking up earlier now to cultivate at a different time from Hunyo. This way, he would not need to run all over the place to cultivate elsewhere. Not bad. I'll be able to break through to the 8th layer of element gathering tier in 3 days. Ling Han smiled. What he wanted the most now was to break through to gushing spring tier and peer into the secrets of the Black Tower. By now, the sun had already risen and Ling Han woke Hunyo up. Though the little girl looked very reluctant, she still adhered to Ling Han's request and began to cultivate. Hunyo had such a terrifying potential, who knows, her future achievements may not be one bit beneath his. Ling Han prepared breakfast. He was extremely depressed at this. It was fine when he had Hunyo staying with him, but now that there were 2 bigger girls living with him, it was still up to him to cook. This was really unfair. Tong, tong, tong. A knock sounded on the main door. Who could it be? Ling Han walked over, opened the door, and discovered that his visitor was Jin Wuji. Why did this guy come over? Brother Jin, why are you here so early? Ling Han asked, smiling. Jin Wuji smiled bitterly and said, Brother Ling, I would like to ask for your help. With what? Ling Han asked, in no rush to agree to anything yet. Jin Wuji hesitated for a moment, then asked, Is Brother Ling able to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion? Ling Han could not help but look at Jin Wuji strangely. Had this guy struck some deal with Lady Yen? Ling Han had just received the Cherishing Flower command yesterday, and there was already someone here today to ask for his help to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Brother Ling, I don't know what else to do. You know a lot of people, and I'm desperate. That's why I am here to shamelessly ask for your help. Jin Wuji sighed. Ling Han smiled and asked, What's going on? Why would you need a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion? If I tell you, promise me you won't laugh at me. Jin Wuji actually blushed. Ling Han put on a serious face and said, I promise I won't laugh. Jin Wuji gathered his thoughts for a moment, then began to speak. Apparently, he met a daughter of a minor clan from the imperial city a year ago. Her name was Jiang Fei Yan, and the two of them had fallen in love with each other. Their relationship had even reached the point that they were beginning to discuss marriage. However, though the Jin clan was a great clan in Diyuan City, it was only considered a minor clan in the imperial city. Moreover, those who were living in an area under the direct jurisdiction of the emperor all had an inborn arrogance, and felt a sense of superiority towards others. The Jiang clan was thus not very satisfied with a future son-in-law like Jin Wuji and kept trying to separate the couple. Thus, Jin Wuji kept trying to rack his brains, hoping to find some way to change the opinion the Jiang clan had of him. The requirements to enter the Cherishing Flower Pavilion were very high, and anyone who wanted to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion had to at least be from a middle-class clan. Thus, displaying his ability through treating the important members of the Jiang clan to a meal at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was undoubtedly a very good idea. But the problem now was that even if he had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, the Cherishing Flower Pavilion would still ignore his request. What more now that he was still only in Element Gathering Tier? Recently, the Jiang clan appeared to plan on marrying Jiang Fei Yan off to the 7th young master of a middle-class clan. Thus, Jin Wuji really had no idea what else he could do, and so came to try his luck with Ling Han. After all, Ling Han had just arrived at the imperial city for a few days and had already gotten to know a disciple of Wu Songling, and could even possibly be an honored guest of Grandmaster Wu. Therefore, even if Ling Han had no way to make a reservation at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion by himself, he could still go through Wu Songlin to make the reservation. When he heard the full story, Ling Han could not help but laugh loudly as he said, I had never imagined that Brother Jin would actually be a romantic. Brother Ling, you promised you wouldn't laugh. Meanwhile, Jin Wuji was continuously sighing, distress all over his face. Ling Han still continued to laugh. He patted Jin Wuji on his shoulder and said, Brother Jin, I am not able to reserve a table at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but… When Jin Wuji heard his words, he looked disappointed at first. But then, he suddenly heard that meaningful pause, so his heart involuntarily started to beat wildly in excitement. Does Brother Ling have some other way? I can't reserve a regular table, but would a side courtyard be all right? Ling Han asked, smiling. Pooh! Jin Wuji instantly choked. If one wanted to reserve a table at Cherishing Flower Pavilion, then one definitely had to have the cultivation level of Spiritual Ocean Tier and above, or be backed by a Spiritual Ocean Tier elite. For example, the members of the main branch of middle-class clans were able to make a reservation. However, they still needed to make the reservation in advance, because the business of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion was really too good. If they did not make the reservation well in advance, they would not be able to get a table. And in the case of side courtyards, one would at least require the cultivation level of Spiritual Pedestal Tier or the backing of a Spiritual Pedestal Tier elite to be able to make a reservation for a side courtyard. Brother Ling, you're not joking with me, are you? This surprise was huge, leaving Jin Wuji stuttering in his words. Chapter 164. Chapter 164 Snobbish Relatives. Don't worry! Ling Han laughed and asked, When do you intend to treat Miss Zhang's family members? When is the earliest possible time you can get a reservation, Brother Ling? Jin Wuji asked in return. He naturally wanted it to be done as soon as possible. Ling Han spread his hands and answered, Whichever day is fine for me. If you're in a rush, I can get one even tonight. Even tonight? Jin Wuji's heartbeat sped up a bit more. What kind of concept was that? Members of the 8 great clans as well as the imperial family of course had the ability to reserve a side courtyard at the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, but even they would not be able to go there at the drop of a hat. Even these extremely important people had to make reservations well in advance. Only a very rare few had the special privilege to make use of a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion without making any reservations in advance. The Cherishing Flower Pavilion had the practice of setting apart a few side courtyards that were specifically for such emergencies and could be used without any reservations at all. For example, the third Imperial Prince was one who had this special privilege. But who was the third Imperial Prince? He was a genius of martial arts on his own, with a cultivation level of the 7th layer of Gushing Spring tier, also one of the heirs to the throne. In the future, he would definitely become a very powerful person. But what about Ling Han then? Could it be that he also had this kind of special privilege? Jin Wuji was really astonished. He knew that Ling Han was a monster who had charged out like a dark horse to take the first place in the Deyuan tournament, and had even managed to obtain the full support of 3 black-grade low-level alchemists. But that was only in Deyuan City. This was the Imperial City. Ling Han had just been here for a few days, and he was already so high up on the social ladder? To compare yourself with others would indeed drive one crazy. Jin Wuji could not help but sigh internally. He had been in the Imperial City for more than 3 years, but aside from the significant increase of his cultivation level, there was not even one bit of increase to his personal status. If he compared himself with Ling Han, he would really die of embarrassment. He had no suspicions that Ling Han was just bluffing. Ling Han could be a joker at times, but he would never make unrealistic boasts on matters like this. "Tonight, then," Jin Wuji said, barely able to hide the excitement on his face. For a minor clan like the Jiang clan, they wouldn't even be able to step through the main doors of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion, what more to have a meal at one of the side courtyards within. After this night, what need would there be for him to still fear that the Jiang clan would continue to look down on him and object to his and Jiang Feiyan's marriage? "All right." Ling Han nodded. "Thank you, Brother Ling! Thank you, Brother Ling!" Jin Wuji bowed repeatedly, obviously very excited. He secretly decided that no matter what favors Ling Han needed from him in the future, he would do everything in his might to help him. He turned and left. It was naturally to inform the Jiang clan about the dinner tonight. This was something he should be very proud of to announce. Meanwhile, Ling Han remained in his courtyard, immersing himself in comprehending the art of the sword. He had reached a bottleneck, and had been stuck on mere 6 flashes of sword chi for a very long time. Yet, somehow he had still not managed to break through and form the 7th flash of sword chi. In truth, even if it was an extremely capable swordsman, it was already very impressive to be able to form a single flash of sword chi in 10 years' time. Moreover, the more flashes of sword chi one managed to form, the more they would slow down in their advance. By the time a swordsman got to be about 100 years old, if he had managed to form 10 flashes of sword chi, he would be praised as a genius of martial arts. However, Ling Han was not satisfied. His starting point was well ahead of all others, so naturally he could not compare himself with the normal rate of advance. Previously, he had spent a lot of time on discussions of the art of the sword with Mo Gao. Mo Gao was a mad genius who had actually managed to touch a sliver of the mysteries of sword heart, and had given Ling Han a lot of inspiration. On the spot, Ling Han had managed to form his 6th flash of sword chi. However, this had also expended all the accumulated understanding he had built up, so it would be indeed difficult for him to advance another step forward in a short period of time. Ling Han sat in a cross-legged position, holding his right index finger out as if it was a sword he was wielding. He continued to wave his finger around in various sword movements, examining the art of the sword that he had managed to comprehend so far in his mind. Before he knew it, it was already noon. He stopped and got up to prepare food for Hunan. Food for himself and the Lu sisters was just cooked in passing. It would be an accomplishment enough if they even managed to finish off 1/100th of the food that he had prepared. He spent the afternoon on his studies of the art of the sword. For Ling Han, there was nothing much that the academy could teach him. Before he came, he had already decided that the primary purpose he was here was just to make Ling Dongxing happy. However, the path he was meant to walk in the future had already been well planned in advance by him. In the evening, he brought Hunyo along with him to the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. He merely flashed the Cherishing Flower command, and automatically, there were female attendants leading him to an elegant side courtyard and inquiring him about the dishes and wines to be served for the dinner tonight. The appetizers were served first. When Hunyo saw them, she could not help but feel her appetite stirred up and failed to hold back from stealing a few bites, causing the 8 female attendants serving them to cover their mouths as they smiled secretly. Ling Han would naturally not reprimand her either. After all, he was not short of money now. If she finished off a plate, then he'd just have another plate served. After about half an hour, a company of 8 walked in, led by a female attendant. Aside from Jin Wuji, the other 7 people of this party was naturally the members of the Jiang clan. They included Jiang Feiyan and her parents, as well as her 2 aunts and their 2 sons. So this is a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. It's really too beautiful. In the past, we only managed to get into the ordinary rooms of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Looks like Fei Yen has really found the right guy this time. He can even manage to make a reservation for a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Yes. I heard that only members of the 8 great clans and the imperial family have the ability to reserve a side courtyard here. Then wouldn't that mean that we are at the same level as the 8 great clans and the imperial family now? The older members of the Jiang clan were all looking very excited. As a minor clan, they did not have much to worry about. The only thing they lacked was advancement in their social status and recognition of their status. Merely having dinner here tonight would be enough for them to boast for the rest of their lives. Do you have any souvenirs here that I can attach to my clothes? Eldest aunt immediately asked one of the female attendants. If there were, then she would definitely attach it to her clothes every day, and would show it to everyone she met. The female attendant stared blankly. Those who were able to come here to spend money were naturally of extremely high status, so she had never been asked such a question by anyone else before. She could not help but be stunned for a moment, before replying. We don't. How could you not have any? Youngest aunt also leaned over. Why not you ask someone to prepare one for us? That's right. Prepare one, eldest aunt said hurriedly. When they heard the words of these 2 senior relatives, Jin Wuji and Jiang Feiyan both blushed to the roots of their hair, feeling unbearably ashamed. Meanwhile, those 2 cousins of Jiang Feiyan kept staring pervertedly at the faces and breasts of the female attendants with deep focus. Brother Jin! Ling Han stood and waved at Jin Wuji. Brother Ling! Jin Wuji returned the gesture, filled with gratitude. Haha, thank you very much, Brother Jin. Thanks to you, I can also enjoy a meal at this Cherishing Flower Pavilion for once, Ling Han said, smiling. Jin Wuji knew that Ling Han was trying to put him in a high position. He could not help feeling very touched by the action, and only nodded repeatedly. Ling Han smiled. Though there had been a little conflict between himself and Jin Wuji and Jin Wuxiang, Jin Wuji had already apologized long ago, so everything was forgotten. And afterwards, Jin Wuji purposely forfeited his match at the Deyuan tournament, and even brought his own people to help rescue Ling Dongxing. Whether or not Ling Han had needed it, all these were debts that Ling Han owed. Debts would naturally have to be repaid, so Ling Han was very willing to act as a minor role to cast a better light on Jin Wuji. You naturally have to thank our Wuji. Eldest aunt wore a very despising expression, looking very disdainful. I heard that you are a friend of Wuji's from the Deyuan city. You are indeed a country bumpkin that doesn't know the rules of proper society. It was already nice enough to invite you to dinner, and you actually brought a little girl along with you. Jin Wuji's expression changed immediately, and he was about to speak up. Yet when he saw Ling Han shake his head at him, he could only swallow the urge down. Ling Han did not take the words of eldest aunt to heart at all. They went in one ear and out the other. What need was there for him to take such a vulgar person seriously? After all, they would only be meeting this once. In the future, he would not see these people again. Thankfully, the members of the Jiang clan were all mesmerized by the new sights they saw, since it was their first time entering into a side courtyard of the Cherishing Flower Pavilion. When the dishes were served one after another, as smoothly as the flow of water, they could not bother with displaying disdain for Ling Han any longer, and began enjoying the food. Aya! One of the female attendants suddenly exclaimed in shock, pointed at the Jiang Fei Yan's eldest cousin, and said, He touched my bottom. Chapter 165. Chapter 165, Guess whom we saw? Why are you making such a fuss? You have a tiger's bottom, is it that I can't even touch? Zhang Hualien, the eldest cousin, humphed, looking very displeased. After all, touching someone else's bottom was a very lowly thing to do, and he, who thought himself a Casanova, would not want to be exposed for doing such a thing in such a public venue. Aren't you going to apologize to my cousin? Tong Yuan, the second cousin, spoke up as well, arrogance all over his face. We are the most honored customers of your cherishing flower pavilion. Do you know who honored customers are? Those who are able to enter into a side courtyard are all in the ranks of spiritual pedestal tier elites. One word from us, and your whole family would be dead. The female attendant looked both angry and embarrassed. However, she was only a female attendant with little power. It was obviously she who had experienced a loss, yet now, according to them, it was also she who was in the wrong. The two aunts looked on indifferently. In their eyes, a mere female attendant was naturally not worth even a single hair off the heads of their sons. So what if their son touched her bottom? She wouldn't lose a pound of flesh anyway. Moreover, weren't the women here all selling their bodies? What was the point in acting all noble now? Eldest cousin, second cousin, just let it go. Jiang Feiyan spoke up. As a woman, she was naturally sympathizing with the female attendant. However, the one who had taken advantage was her own cousin. She couldn't possibly help outsiders against her own family members, right? Fei Yin, you are going to be a bride of a major clan in future, and going to have a very noble status. There is no need for you to sympathize with these little b******************. Eldest aunt immediately said to Jiang Fei Yin in a lecturing tone. That's right, Fei Yin. You can't be too kind. As the matriarch of a major clan, you must learn to be ruthless in your ways. Youngest aunt continued. Both Jiang Fei Yan's own parents remained silent, however. From the looks of it, both her parents did not have much of a voice within the Jiang clan. Instead, they couldn't even compare with these two daughters who had married outside the clan. The truth was indeed so. The current clan head of the Jiang clan was Jiang Fei Yan's grandmother, and she very much doted on these two daughters of hers who had married outside the clan because they had both managed to marry well. Both their husbands were members of middle-class clans. Though their husbands were not very important in their own clans, they still benefited from the protection and influence of their clans. Naturally, they were very confident in front of their relatives who were only members of a minor clan. Every time they returned to their parents' home, they would strut around in front of their siblings. As time passed, Jiang Fei Yan's parents spoke less, allowing these two aunts to speak as much as they liked. This time, the plans to marry Jiang Fei Yan off to a middle-class clan was naturally the handiwork of these two aunts. In their eyes, this was naturally all for Jiang Fei Yan's own good. However, Jin Wuji suddenly transformed to become so awesome that he could even manage to reserve a side courtyard of cherishing flower pavilion. The attitudes of these two aunts naturally changed, and they began to mend their relationship with Jiang Fei Yan's father, intending to get to a higher position through the help of Jin Wuji in the future. The female attendant was already crying from the harsh words of these two aunts. Unfortunately, the cherishing flower pavilion had its own rules. She did not dare to cover up her face and leave it all. Zhang Hualien saw this and became even bolder as he said, "Come and sit beside me. Accompany me for a cup of wine." Humph! Ling Han stood up. He knew that the members of the Jiang clan were snobbish and overbearing, yet had never thought that even two juniors would behave so lecherously out in the open. He approached that female attendant, handed her a monetary note, and said, "I am really sorry. This is a small token from me. Though it cannot compensate for the wounds to your self-esteem, but please accept it." That female attendant took one look at the monetary note, and paled in shock. It was a monetary note worth 10,000 silver coins, One had to understand that she was only a female attendant who had a cultivation level of the 7th layer of body refining tier. The most she could earn in a single month would be about 300 silver coins. Though this was also quite a considerable sum of money, when compared with the colossal amount of 10,000, there was indeed a huge difference. "Mister, I do not dare accept," she said, blushing. "Just accept it," Ling Han said, smiling. He waved his hand and said, "We do not need your service here anymore. All of you may leave." "Yes, mister." The 8 female attendants all bowed in response. They naturally were well aware that the real boss here was Ling Han, and they all looked at Ling Han with gratitude in their eyes. When their eyes swept over the few members of the Jiang clan, their gazes were filled with strong disdain and despise. "Who allowed you to leave? All of you are to stay here," Zhang Hualian immediately called out. "That's right. How dare you leave?" Tong Yuan even stood up, and from the look of him, he was planning to stop them from leaving. Jin Wuji hurriedly stood as well and pushed Tong Yuan back into his seat as he said, "Second cousin, forget about it." He was aware that Ling Han was already displeased. If Tong Yuan dared to step forward and make trouble, Ling Han would most likely fly into a rage on the spot. Those 2 ants of the Jiang clan were also about to explode, but when they saw that Jin Wuji had spoken up to settle the issue, they could only push down their anger. They did not dare offend Jin Wuji now. After all, he was a man who could manage to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. "Wuji, youngest ant is not really trying to reprimand you. However, your kindness to your friends is because of your own loyalty to friends, but friends would still be outsiders. How could they be as dependable as your own people?" Youngest ant pursed her lips, targeting Ling Han with her words. "That's right. Just take a look. You kindly invited your friend over to broaden his horizons, and what does he do? He actually brought a filthy little girl with him. She looks like she has not eaten anything in her entire life. How embarrassing. My advice is, it's best to break off the friendship with such a person," eldest ant said as well. The 2 had not spoken in very low voices, obviously deliberately loud enough for Ling Han to hear their words. Jin Wuji received a horrible scare. Break off the friendship with such a person? If he did not have the friendship with such a person, how would you all be able to sit here to enjoy dinner tonight? He stole a look at Ling Han, and when he saw that Ling Han did not appear to be angry, he was greatly relieved. Still, he did not dare to allow these 2 shrews to continue with their words, and quickly said, Come. Everyone, please enjoy your drinks and food. Uncle, Auntie, please allow me to offer you a drink." He raised his head directly, and drained his cup. Ling Han knew that Jin Wuji was making his apologies in this way. He smiled calmly. Tonight's dinner was to repay Jin Wuji's previous favors to him, so he would naturally not easily be angered. All would depend on whether those 2 ants of the Jiang clan continued to seek their deaths. After a few rounds of wine, they were all a bit tipsy. Eldest ant stood up, and said to youngest ant, "We have never been to a side courtyard before. Let's go stroll around. Who knows, we might meet with some important people. If we manage to befriend them, then we'd flourish in the future." Right. Youngest ant hurriedly stood up as well. This pair of snobbish sisters leaned on each other, and made their way out. However, after only a few moments they returned, and it was as if their faces were shining. "Guess whom we saw just now?" Without waiting for an answer, they both quickly answered their own question. "Grandmaster Yuan Chu Yuan! Do you all know who Grandmaster Yuan Chu is? A black-grade middle-level alchemist. His status is high enough to scare all of you to death." The members of the Jiang clan did indeed receive a scare. That was a black-grade middle-level alchemist they were talking about. A being like that was like a mountain to them, someone that they could only look up to. "Hualian, Yuan, come with me, quick. Let's go and greet Grandmaster Yuan Chu. Who knows, when Grandmaster Yuan Chu is happy, he'd decide to concoct a few furnaces worth of alchemical pills for us. By that time, it would be very easy for the 2 of you to break through to element gathering tier," eldest ant said excitedly. That was why the two of them had returned in such a hurry. That would not be appropriate, would it? Grandmaster Yuan Chu is of very noble status. If we so rashly disturb him, it may possibly anger Grandmaster Yuan Chu. Jin Wuji said immediately. Ling Han did not get angry for his sake, but who was Grandmaster Yuan Chu? There was no way that he would give face to Jin Wuji, and definitely not to the Jiang clan. Che, we are now high up on the social ladder as well. We're just asking for a few furnaces worth of pills. Youngest aunt said calmly. You two are idiots! Jin Wuji cursed internally. He suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge to rush forward and slap these two silly. Chapter 166. Chapter 166. Getting into trouble. Anyone who could manage to sit and dine in a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion was considered of extremely noble status. What kind of bizarre theory was that? These two idiots. Who was Grandmaster Yuan Chu? If they dared to so rashly barge in, who knows if he would be angered by their lack of manners? Even if they were killed right on the spot, they would have died for nothing. Unfortunately, this pair of sisters had already lost their wits. Mother, can we really break through to element gathering tier? Zhang Hualien asked very excitedly. Of course. He is an authentic black-grade middle-level alchemist. Breaking through to gushing spring tier would be a piece of cake with his help. What more element gathering tier? Eldest aunt waved her hand, acting as if Yuan Chu was her servant that she could command to concoct alchemical pills as she liked. Good, good, good. Quickly, let's go! Zhang Hualien and Tong Yuan both stood up hurriedly. Neither of them were very talented in martial arts, and had been stuck in the 9th layer of body refining tier for quite some time without any hint of breaking through any time soon. In the Imperial City, this kind of cultivation level was really considered trash. The two mother and son pairs impatiently rushed out. Jiang Feiyan's parents were about to stop them from leaving, when Ling Han signaled at Jin Wuji with his eyes, indicating him to stop the Jiang parents from doing anything. Just let them experience a little hardship, Ling Han said calmly. Brother Ling, that's Grandmaster Yuan Chu we're talking about here. If he were to get angry, Jin Wuji was no idiot. If a black-grade middle-level alchemist wanted to oppose a minor clan who only had a background of gushing spring tier, that would only require a mere thought from the former. He would not care if those two unreasonable, snobbish mother and son pairs died as a result of their idiocy, but worried that they would also drag the Jiang clan down with them. No matter. Ling Han smiled faintly. If it was anyone else, he would still have to do something to settle the issue. However, it was Yuan Chu. He was practically Ling Han's lackey. Jiang Feiyan's parents were not fools. When they heard the conversation between the two young men, how could they not understand? They finally knew that Ling Han was the real reason why they were able to enter into Cherishing Flower Pavilion. How foolish and funny of them to have thought that Ling Han had come over to join in the dinner on Jin Wuji's invitation. Since Brother Ling says so, then I am relieved. When Jin Wuji saw that Jiang Feiyan and her parents had understood the ins and outs of the situation, he naturally would not continue to hide the truth, and said, It is all thanks to Brother Ling that I was able to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion this time. I am only benefiting from my association with you. The Jiang parents both smiled. Firstly, they were not as snobbish as those two aunts, and secondly, they were smarter than them. It was all right that it was not Jin Wuji's credit that they were able to come here. The important thing was that Jin Wuji had this kind of relationship, friend and background. In the future, as long as Jin Wuji was able to marry Jiang Feiyan, then others would still give a bit of face to the Jiang clan, even if only for Ling Han's sake. It was an extremely pleasurable thing to interact with smart people, and the air around the banquet table became livelier. Even Hunyo was clapping her hands on the table, demanding to drink wine, which caused all the others to laugh at her antics. On the surface, the little girl was still very adorable and cute, so much that Jiang Feiyan continuously stared at her. Since Miss Jiang likes children so much, why not quickly marry Brother Jin and have a cute son of your own? I will definitely prepare a very, very big red packet as a gift at that time, Ling Han teased. Jiang Fei Yan instantly blushed red and lowered her head shyly. Meanwhile, Jin Wuji was much bolder than her, and said with a loud laugh, "Brother Ling, that's what you said. A very, very big red packet, right? I will remember your words, and you definitely can't break your word. Niu wants red packet too," Hu Niu proclaimed, raising her hand. "Just eat you." Ling Han shoved a chicken thigh into her hands, and the little girl immediately began chewing on it happily. Woo woo woo. It was at this moment that the door to the side courtyard was pushed open. Zhang Hualien and Tong Yuan were both supporting their respective mothers as they entered. All four of them were scowling miserably, and looked as if they had just received a terrible thrashing. They were all black and blue, making for a very sorry display. With all said and done, Jiang Fei Yan's father was still the younger brother of these two women. He hurriedly stood up and asked, "What has happened?" "Uncle." Zhang Hualien and Tong Yuan were both shivering in fear as they said, "We went over to request Grand Master Yuan Chu to help us concoct some alchemical pills, but he did not agree to our request. Mother and youngest aunt said some rash things, which angered Grand Master Yuan Chu. He had us beaten up, and said that he would be coming over later to see what clan would dare to act so arrogant. Uncle, I'm still young. I don't want to die. You have to save me. Wuji, I am your eldest cousin. You can't simply stand by and watch as I die, right? You must have some way to save us, right?" One of the cousins begged for Jiang Fei Yan's father to help them, while the other pled with Jin Wuji to save them. Jiang Fei Yan's father immediately frowned, and looked very displeased. These two sisters of his kept trying to make him lose face within the clan and had even allowed their two sons to interfere in the matters of the Jiang clan. They were obviously intending to make a grab for the family property of the Jiang clan. He could tolerate all this because he was not a person who placed a lot of importance on power and material things in the first place. Moreover, he only had a single daughter, and his one and only wish was for his daughter to marry a good man. Then, he would be able to leave all his worries behind, and travel all over the world with his beloved wife. But these two idiots actually went and angered a black-grade alchemist. Were they trying to drag the Jiang clan down with them? There was too much involved in this issue. There was absolutely no way that he would allow the whole Jiang clan to fall as a result of their stupidity and die with them, so he said, "You were the ones who caused the trouble. You figure out how to get Grand Master Yuanchu's forgiveness on your own. Jiangbo Xian, you're really too ruthless." Eldest aunt instantly jumped up, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. "These are your flesh and blood nephews, and you want to just stand by and watch as they die." Jiang Fei Yan's father could not help but shake his head. These two sisters of his had not even realized the errors of their ways. They were really unreasonable. Then, he asked furiously, "What did you actually say to Grand Master Yuanchu that he would be making his way here personally?" Eldest aunt and the other three all exchanged hesitant looks, but did not say anything. According to what Jiang Fei Yan's father knew of their characters, how could he not guess? The four of them must have dragged everyone here into the issue in order to escape. They must have bluffed, and said some grand names to be able to escape out of that situation. After all, those who were able to reserve a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion were all of extremely noble status. Grand Master Yuanchu would definitely not drop to the level of the four idiots, but would still make his way to personally see the host here. He would be calling the main host to account for the offense that these four had committed. They were really going to suffer, and everything was because of these four idiots. Jiang Fei Yan's father suddenly felt an urge to spit out blood in his extreme fury. It was already enough that these two mother and son pairs were as stupid as pigs, but they actually even implicated others, making him feel an uncontrollable urge to tear all four of them into pieces. From outside, the sound of footsteps was heard coming nearer and nearer. Then, a knock was heard on the door, and a man's voice said, "We are here on behalf of Grand Master Yuanchu to pay our respects to the host of this side courtyard." Shua, Jin Wuji and the others all stood, all of them looking very anxious. Though Ling Han had already assured them just now that everything would be all right, he was really still much too young. Who would put too much confidence in his words? When they thought about it, even if Ling Han was awesome, the source of his awesomeness must be from the party behind him. But what party could actually overcome the fury of a black-grade middle-level alchemist? Within Rain Country, there were only a few individuals who would have such ability, such as the current Rain Emperor and the clan heads of the 8 great clans. Quickly go and receive Grand Master Yuan Chu, Jiang Fei Yan's father said hurriedly. He did not believe that Ling Han's backer could be even more powerful than a black-grade middle-level alchemist. It was simple. Ling Han was not a member of the imperial family of Rain Country, nor one of the younger members of the 8 great clans. All of them approached the door. Everyone was shuddering apprehensively. The pressure of an oncoming meeting with a black-grade middle-level alchemist was really much too heavy. Ling Han meanwhile remained seated where he was, and together with Hu Niu, continued to enjoy his food. Chapter 167. Chapter 167, Pursuing the Matter. Which clan are you all from? How dare you be so bold to actually command Grand Master Yuan Chu to concoct alchemical pills for you? I really want to know if you all are from the imperial family or the 8 great clans. They were from the Wu clan, one of the 8 great clans. Because the 8 great clans and the imperial family were all very familiar with one another, they naturally knew that none of these people came from one of these 9 powerful parties. And since they were not, what other party would be more powerful than the Wu clan in the whole of Rain Country? In their minds, these people must have come from some backwater place and gone through some unknown relations to be able to enter into a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion. Thus, they thought themselves superior to all others that they would even dare to be so insolent in front of Grand Master Yuan Chu. We. Eldest Aunt was shivering so much she kept stuttering. Her eyes were filled with a strong fear as she had already recognized the clan insignia that these 3 men were wearing, the Wu clan, one of the 8 great clans. Though she had married into a good clan, it was only a middle-class clan. Moreover, her husband was only a minor character with little actual power in the clan. If he knew that she actually offended the Wu clan, it was practically guaranteed that he would cut off her head at the earliest opportunity, and head to the Wu clan to beg for forgiveness. The 8 great clans had the authority to decide one's life and death, and were only beneath the imperial family in terms of power. I. Say it quickly. Who gave you the audacity to actually dare shout commands at Grand Master Yuan Chu? The 3 men of the Wu clan pressed menacingly, smiling coldly at them. Jiang Fei Yan's father almost fainted in shock and terror. He had only heard his 2 elder sisters downplay the real situation, about how their request for Grand Master Yuan Chu to concoct alchemical pills for them had been refused. He had never imagined that his 2 stupid sisters would actually dare act so insolently to Grand Master Yuan Chu. He was completely pale by this point. If a black-grade middle-level alchemist were to be angered, and the Wu clan of the 8 great clans stepped out to punish the offender, the Jiang clan was definitely going to be finished, and no one would dare to speak a single word in their defense. Wouldn't that be the case? Who asked them to offend an alchemist in the first place? Alchemists were an outstanding group of their own. They were a group of people others wanted nothing more than favor and goodwill of, and what do? You actually dare to behave so rudely to an alchemist. Who else were they going to kill if not you? Old 6, old 8, go and slap them. The mouths of these 2 be are really too smelly. Just now, because Grand Master Yuan Chu was there, we did not have enough fun slapping them. Go and continue slapping them, a green-robed middle-aged man said. All right. The other 2 walked forwards to grab eldest aunt and youngest aunt. Both of them were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and had outstandingly strong ability. Though eldest aunt and youngest aunt wanted to flee, how could things go their way? They were instantly caught. Pa. The 2 shrews with bad mouths were continuously slapped, and very quickly, their faces were completely swollen. They even spat out a few pieces of broken teeth, and this was still because the 2 men had pulled their punches. Otherwise, if they had really used their full strength, what could 2 mere weaklings in body refining tier do? Zhang Hualian and Tong Yuan did not even dare to say one word. They could only curl around one another and hide in a corner. I am a daughter-in-law of Duanmu clan. Don't kill me! Eldest aunt sobbed. Her face that used to be quite smooth and rounded was now completely covered with blood and tears, making for an indescribably ugly picture. Duanmu clan? The green-robed man humphed. When has the Duanmu clan become so awesome? I'd really like to get an explanation from Duanmu Xiang. Duanmu Xiang was the current clan head of the Duanmu clan, but from the tone that this green-robed man was using, he obviously did not think that he was anyone important, causing eldest aunt to be filled with hopelessness. The emergency situation caused her brain to work faster, and she hurriedly called out, Wuji! Wuji! Save me! That's right, Wuji. Since you can manage to reserve a side courtyard here, your status must not be beneath his. Announce your status to scare him to death. Youngest aunt suddenly called out as well, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Ha ha ha! The green-robed man laughed coldly. Someone actually wanted to use his status to scare him to death. Then he really wanted to know what person could be so awesome. Jin Wuji only felt a layer of cold sweat covering his body. He was only the third young master of the Jin clan of Deyuan City. In Deyuan City, this identity was indeed enough to scare a lot of people to death, but when in the Imperial City, Pei, it was nothing. What Wuji are you? The green-robed man smiled coldly. I am standing right here. Tell me your name, and see if you can scare me to death? This sir must be joking. This is all just a misunderstanding, Jin Wuji said, raising his clasped hands politely in greeting. These two seniors have drunk too much, and that's why they had so boldly went off to look for Grandmaster Yuan Chu. I would very much like to ask for forgiveness from all of you as well as Grandmaster Yuan Chu. Do you know what this shrew actually called Grandmaster Yuan Chu? There was a sliver of a mocking smile about the corners of the green-robed man's lips. Old dog! Did you hear that? They actually dared to call Grandmaster Yuan Chu old dog. I have lived for so many years and this is the first time I've seen someone actually dared to insult Grandmaster Yuan Chu as old dog. Jin Wuji and the other three members of the Jiang clan all turned pale. They had almost leaped forwards to strangle these two shrews to death. If they wanted to die, then they should just die on their own. Why had they come back to drag others down with them? Eldest aunt and youngest aunt were both filled with absolute regret. Part of the reason they dared to behave so arrogantly was because they had suddenly been able to sit within a side courtyard of Cherishing Flower Pavilion, making them feel as if their social status had shot up all of a sudden. But the more important reason was because they were indeed drunk. Otherwise, no matter how idiotic they were, they would not have dared to so rashly request for alchemical pills from Grandmaster Yuan Chu. What more insult him as old dog after being refused? But now, it was all too late. Nothing more to say, right? The green-robed man crossed his hands behind his back, his eyes sweeping over the surroundings, and gave a humph, as he said, You country bumpkins are indeed arrogant. I've already been here for such a long time, and there is actually someone who still dares to remain seated. He had finally spotted Ling Han. Ling Han did not even spare him a look. He only focused all his energy on fighting with Hunyo over the food. He was naturally just playing with the little girl, because even if he had managed to successfully grab any food, he would not eat it. He was already full. How insolent! Seeing your father here, you still dare to remain seated? The green-robed man glared, and a domineering pressure emanated from him. Ling Han's eyes turned cold, and gave a wave of his hand. The bone in his hand immediately flew towards the green-robed man. The green-robed man stretched out a hand to grab the bone, but just when his hand was about to come into contact with it, the piece of bone actually miraculously turned in a different direction, past his hand, and with a paw, hit his face. Firstly, he had underestimated his opponent, and secondly, Ling Han had tossed it in a strange way, which was what allowed for such a thing to happen. You are seeking death! The green-robed man roared furiously. He leaped forwards towards Ling Han and brandished his fist, preparing to give Ling Han a thrashing. Ling Han's feet pressed down on the ground, and he had shot backwards. Using the exiting cloud steps was something that he could do easily. A weakling of mere element gathering tier actually could act so calmly when under the assault of a gushing spring tier elite? The green-robed man did not manage to hit his target, but when he still did not manage to take Ling Han down after a few moves, a serious expression came over his face. He stopped his attack and said, "Brat, who are you? Slap yourself 10 times first. Then I'll talk to you," Ling Han said calmly. This man actually dared to call himself Ling Han's father right in front of him. How could he let him off without a thrashing? What arrogance! The green-robed man humped coldly, and once again began attacking Ling Han. Xiao, Hunyo quickly scrambled down from the chair and shot towards the green-robed man at an extremely fast speed. The green-robed man had not taken Hunyo into account at first. But when the little girl moved, he experienced a sudden shock that this little girl who was only 5 to 6 years old was actually in element gathering tier. Who would dare believe it? But due to his extreme fury, he decided to do something very underhanded. Since he could do nothing to Ling Han, then he just hurt this little girl instead. A cold smile appeared on his face, and he suddenly delivered a punch that made its way ruthlessly towards Hunyo. "You dare!" Ling Han roared in anger. This man would actually cause such heavy injury to such a little girl. He was practically inhumane. He quickly leaped forwards, intending to block this punch for Hunyo. Chapter 168. Chapter 168. Hunyo's Sneaky Kick. Ling Han was too far to be able to help Hunyo, and right when he saw the fist of this green-robed man was just about to hit Hunyo's body, the little girl suddenly twisted away in a strange manner and dodged the incoming attack. In an instant, she appeared behind the green-robed man, formed her hands into claws and shwa, 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 delivered her own attack. Pun, pun, pun. An intensive round of attacks was heard, and the green-robed man once again paid the price for his carelessness. His back suffered a number of continuous attacks, and the clothing on his body was torn into pieces that flew around him like butterflies, followed by drops of blood spraying everywhere. Who would have thought that a little girl only 5 to 6 years old would have such formidable ability? However, there was ultimately a very big power gap between element gathering and gushing spring tier. Though the green-robed man looked to be in a terrible situation, he had already used origin power to protect his body. Thus, he did not suffer a serious injury. All his bones and internal organs were unharmed. Even so, he let out an ashamed and furious roar. He was a powerful elite warrior of the second layer of gushing spring tier, and he was actually so horribly wounded by a little girl. Die! He shot a punch towards Hunyo, who was still on his back. Hunyo immediately moved, and twisted around to place herself on the green-robed man's chest. Ping! He did not manage to stop his punch in time and actually punched his own back. The extreme pain caused his face to turn green, and tears uncontrollably rolled down his cheeks from the agony. Ling Han's cultivation level may have dropped, but his eyes were still very sharp. One look, and he did not worry anymore. Hunyo was going to be absolutely okay. Get away from me! The green-robed man once again shot out his fist, this time towards his chest. But it was as if Hunyo was a monkey. She quickly and nimbly moved, and was now hanging onto his thigh. This time, the green-robed man finally learned his lesson. He managed to stop his own attack in time. Unfortunately, Hunyo delivered a sneaky kick right to his vulnerable B**********. So what if he was in gushing spring tier? There was still a lot of weaknesses on the person's body, such as the eyes, dantian, and for men, their D**********. This kick was very solid and powerful. Immediately, the green-robed man used his hands to cover the place between his legs. He was swaying on his feet, and his whole face was red as he ground his teeth loudly. It was very clear to see that the veins on his neck were throbbing, but he could not even force out a single word in his agony. All the men in the area could not help but cross their legs tightly together as they felt a coldness in their hearts that gave rise to a layer of cold sweat. Hunyo jumped off, and clung onto Ling Han. She turned around and made a face at the green-robed man, as if she was merely an innocent, mischievous little girl. Pa, the green-robed man fell into a half-kneeling position on the ground. His whole body was spasming. It was obvious that this kick had injured him very severely. Who would have thought that a powerful elite of gushing spring tear would be defeated by a little girl in such a humiliating way? That's right. Such a move would incur disdain if it were anyone else, but if it were Hu Niu, it was only to be expected. A big, strong man like you actually lowered yourself to bully a little girl. Even if your B***** were crushed, you would have deserved it. Moreover, you are in gushing spring tear, and your opponent is only a little kid 5 to 6 years old. This was a matter of unbearable shame and humiliation. Good job! Ling Han gave Hu Niu a thumbs up. If anyone else dares to bully you in future, just kick them so hard you crush their B**********. If you get into trouble, don't worry. I'll be there to defend you. Niu understands. Hu Niu gave a wide, sweet smile. Right. How could he teach a child like that? Wasn't he worried that he would be a bad influence on her, and that she would become a female hooligan when she grew up? You're in big trouble. We are members of the Wu clan. The Wu clan. Have you heard of us? We're one of the 8 great clans. The other 2 members of the Wu clan tried to put up a strong appearance, though they were very afraid right now. The 2 of them were barely in element gathering tier 1. Don't think that just because they were the clansmen of a great clan, they were automatically powerful elites. Every clan had members that were more talented and those that were less talented. Then you 2 should also stay behind as well. Ling Han made a move, and charged to attack the other 2. At the 4th layer of element gathering tier, he was already strong enough to oppose a powerful elite in the 9th layer of element gathering tier like Qi Yongyi. Now that his cultivation level had soared up to the 7th layer, what could these 2 pieces of trash do against him? With one move, he had subdued the 2. Hu Niu moved and gave the 2 men a violent thrashing. The members of the Jiang clan were all watching with a layer of cold sweat covering them. Those were clansmen of the Wu clan, and they were actually beaten up like they were dead dogs. Everything was over. Everyone here would be dying. Even eldest aunt and youngest aunt could no longer care about continuing to wail about their pains. They hurriedly rushed over, trying to stop Ling Han and Hu Niu, these 2 maniacs. Ling Han would naturally not entangle himself with 2 shrews. He took several steps back. Anyways, he had already had his fun thrashing these 3 men. You're all dead. The green-robed man finally got his breath back, his face filled with shame and rage. He was in gushing spring tear, and should have been able to easily take all the people here down. Yet, in the end, he was actually so easily defeated at the hands of a little girl. He would never be able to wash away such a shameful thing from his name. If you don't speak, no one will think you are mute. Ling Han delivered a kick, and half the teeth in the green-robed man's mouth was spat out. The pain caused him to cry out. His injuries had become even heavier this time. The members of the Jiang clan were all looking at Ling Han as if he was crazy. In their eyes, Ling Han could not possibly have a background that could surpass the 8 great clans in terms of power. But he actually dared to thrash the members of the Wu clan so harshly. Wasn't that like an old man committing suicide? Tired of living? Even Jin Wuji was completely cold. He was well aware that Ling Han had come from Diyuan City, just like he had. At most, he was only familiar with a few black-grade low-level alchemists. They had gotten into trouble. This was really big trouble. We don't know you. Eldest aunt and youngest aunt said in trembling voices. Then they turned to Jiang Fei Yan's father and said, Jiang Bo Xian, we're also cutting all ties with you. From now onwards, there is no more relation between us. You were the ones who caused this trouble. Don't implicate us in this. Jiang Fei Yan, her parents, and Jin Wuji were all furious at their words. These 2 pairs of mother and son were the ones who had so rashly rushed out to find Grandmaster Yuan Chu, and had even dared to insult him as old dog. And now they had nothing to do with the issue? How could there be such shameless people? None of you would be able to escape, the green-robed man said maliciously. His whole lower half was completely numb, and he could not feel anything at all, so he had no idea if he was still a man. If he was really disabled as a man, then he would kill everyone here 3 times to vent his hatred. You still dare to open your mouth? Ling Han was very surprised and raised his foot once more. No. The green-robed man was terrified. This young man was practically a maniac. He obviously knew that he was from the Wu clan, and he still dared to attack him. Moreover, every move he made was extremely ruthless, so he was really terrified. Who asked him to be too heavily injured now that he could not even display an ounce of his real strength? But he swore that he would definitely break Ling Han's bones and throw his ashes to the winds. You're not behaving inside your heart, Ling Han said calmly. Hu Niu immediately bared her teeth and growled, displaying her ferocious nature. The green-robed man felt his heart tighten. Compared to Ling Han, he was actually more fearful of Hu Niu. This little girl was practically like a demonic beast in human form. You could still reason with humans, still threaten humans or bribe them, but what about demonic beasts? Mere words were completely useless. Just give up. Even if I beat you half to death, the seniors of your clan would only say that I did a good thing, Ling Han said calmly. Nonsense, the green-robed man immediately said disdainfully in his heart. Even the members of the Jiang clan were shaking their heads at this. That was absolutely impossible. The only way that could be possible was if Ling Han was actually the illegitimate son of the Rain Emperor. If he were, then he indeed could possibly make the Wu clan lower their heads in front of him. Zifeng, have you not settled the issue yet? It was at this moment that the voice of an old man was heard from outside. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.